The February 14th. I call to order the February 14th meeting of Planning and Zoning. Happy Valentine's Day. Please rise.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, hi, Sage.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Sage.
Hi, Sage.
Hi, guys. Happy Valentine's Day to you all.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United States of America. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So, roll call pledge. Has everybody read tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Oh, roll call. Sorry.
Jeff here. Michael here.
Lynn here.
Amanda here.
Sage here.
Thank you. Back, approval of the regular agenda. Anybody have any additions, deletions, anything? No. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the agenda for February 14th.
2000. Second,
Second.
motion by Amanda, second by Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sage? Okay,
I said hi.
has everybody read the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Have anything to say about the minutes? Sage, did you read the minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
You weren't here though, were you?
What?
At the last meeting. So.
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so nobody has any corrections, edits, anything? So may I have a motion to accept the minutes of January 24th, 2024, please?
I make a motion to accept the minutes of the January 24th, 2024.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Amanda, second by Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, declaration of conflicts of interest on tonight's agenda. Does anybody have any? No? No. Okay. Public comments. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to have any public comments? Neither one of you want to come up and surprise us? Okay. We'll close public comment. No special presentations? Anybody? No? Design review and land use public hearings. Ordinance TBD. Series 2024 amending provisions contained in Chapter 13, Utility Code, Chapter 16, Zoning Code, Chapter 17, Subdivision Code, Chapter 18, Building Code of the Minturn Code. Who's taking it? Mike?
You pointed at me? Oh. Well, happy to be here with the Planning and Zoning Commission tonight. Don't always get the opportunity to attend your meetings. This is a I would say consequential application for the town. As I am pretty sure everybody on P and Z is aware, back in 2007, 2008, the town approved a number of agreements and land use approvals for a largely private ski area development, starting out at the Bolts Lake area and moving further south up onto Battle Mountain. For various reasons, that development stalled, leaving open questions about what the town could or should do about some very large promises that had been made as part of that annexation and development approval. Those promises ranged from building a new water treatment plant for the town to funding various acquisitions of land, improving recreational facilities, just as kind of a subscope of what the developer had promised at that time. The town and the developer had gone through a couple of machinations to try and retool the planned unit development in a way that made sense for current economics as well as the needs of the town of Minturn. We did not successfully deal with that, or we were unable to reach terms that were mutually acceptable at that time. And the result was that the town filed litigation in 2021, I believe, against the Battle Mountain entities seeking redress for breach of contract promises. As that litigation went forward, I think it became very clear, at least from the representations of Battle Mountain, that there was not a big pool of dollars at the end of the if we were to prevail, that we could turn to and get some benefit for the citizens of Minturn. And the conversation then shifted to the concept that as opposed to getting dollars from Battle Mountain as compensation for settling with the litigation, that the town would get land. And the settlement contemplates that the town would get some pretty significant and meaningful chunks of land. Probably the highest and best one would be what's called the Highlands property, which is back in the pines towards the mountains on the far side of Bolts Lake. The town would also have the option to acquire what's called the Old Tailings Pile, which is a very large tract of land that runs to the west, I'm guessing, of Tigglewood Road. Okay. After that property had been fully remediated, the town would get an approximately 2-acre parcel of land next to the existing Minturn Fitness Center to further develop public facilities at that location. And the town would be the beneficiary of restrictions on certain parcels of land, in particular the old or the consolidated tailings pile, which really requires that it simply be left in its remediated state and not much done to it, as well as a large portion of the wetlands area located in Malloy Creek. And while the town wouldn't own those parcels necessarily, we would be the beneficiary of a use restriction that effectuates the town's best interests in those properties. So with kind of those possibilities being made available to the town, we were able to hammer out a conceptual agreement for how Battle Mountain would move forward with land use approvals in front of the town. And because the Battle Mountain property has some unique both characteristics to it, as well as the need to incorporate or make successful the settlement agreement and bringing that to a hopeful successful closing, the town agreed to some battle specific code provisions. Well, let me take that back. The town endorsed, no, that's also not correct. The town agreed to bring to the Planning Commission and to the council consideration of code changes which would be specific to Battle Mountain's property and not applicable to other areas of the town. And we're going to go through some of those uniquenesses to the Battle Mountain property. I want to stress that even though the town has a settlement agreement with Battle Mountain, nothing in that settlement agreement requires that either this board or the town council approve what we're proposing. You are hearing these as an independent legislative referral body, and so you can request changes, you can voice opposition. This is not a situation where just because we have reached a settlement that contemplates further steps, that you're obliged to vote one way or the other. That being said, I believe that the settlement agreement offers the town a lot of benefits, and we hope that you'll see some of those through the lenses that we're presenting these code changes. So that's kind of background. Does anybody have any background questions as to how we got to the place we are today? Okay. Yes.
The only
question I had is from a timing perspective, it did look like the settlement had some end dates. Can you just remind the commission of those?
Those are, I believe, the end of April, and we have already begun discussing with Battle that there probably will be a need to push some of those deadlines out as we work through various implementation requirements. So let's kind of go through the draft ordinance. We'll hit on the things that are, I think, important. Section 4, kind of, if you read through, if you have any questions for the recitals in sections 1, 2, and 3, let me know. They're kind of formulaic.
I did have a question on the
please.
recitals.
Mhm.
So the recital, I think it's number 5, that indicates held various work sessions and public hearings with both the town council and planning commission. Is that prior to, like, can you just
There-
provide that?
There was, and the planning commission will have to remind me if we did bring this before planning commission. There was a very big public participation effort made back in. This is where my memory gets a little foggy. That would have been 2022 that I think we were going through the into early 2023 when we were going through what the settlement agreement contemplated, and we brought that at least 2 or 3 times in front of council.
We did. I don't know to the extent, if any, that it came before the planning commission.
I can take that reference out. There, if you recall, there really was a lot of both written materials and online materials at that time, trying to get people to engage about what the settlement had in it. Any other items? All right, you don't normally see provisions of the utility code in front of you, but because they're all here in one place, with the zoning and the subdivision requirements, doesn't hurt to at least talk about them. The important thing to know is that a very material part of the settlement agreement was that Minturn North was going to, or I'm sorry, Battle Mountain was going to have to take advantage of a contract provision that they have with ERWSD, where ERWSD has to provide them with treated water service. Now, it's a lot more complex than that statement, but when Battle Mountain sold the reservoir site for Bolts Lake to ERWSD to redevelop as a larger functional reservoir, one of the conditions that Battle Mountain exacted was that the ERWSD would have to provide them with treated water supply. And so this section of the code, these sections of the code more or less say the town's utility code isn't going to provide for your water service. ERWSD is going to provide for your water service, and you can't look to the town for the lack of a water supply and say we have the right to tap in to your system. I guess everything can be renegotiated if the money's right, but that's how this reads now. Let's see. And the way that Battle Mountain will demonstrate that it has sufficient taps for undertaking land use, they will have to get what's called a can and will serve letter from ERWSD, which will be presented to the town saying, you've been submitted with a subdivision application for 40 units. We have 40 units to provide, and they will make that service available. And I saw Tim's raising your hand. No, okay. If I go really off the rails, just raise your hand, Tim. So, okay. So that's really the gist of the utility code provisions. Any questions from council about utility code items?
I always have questions.
Yeah.
Hey, you're new to the game.
I know. So when I looked at this settlement, it looked like, and this is, so you're talking in our, so like, when you're saying the utility submittals, you're already going into the ordinance?
I meant, yeah, that's correct. That's kind of my short summary of section. Section 4 of the ordinance, utility code.
Yeah. So the couple questions I had was, it's really around the 1041.
Mhm.
It looked like, as part of the settlement, we exempted them from 1041, but it was only specific to the water utility. And then, and this is maybe just a clarification question, is that post, if they needed an expansion, then that would no longer be exempt from 1041. Is that the correct?
Yes, and this is a very astute point to have picked up on. So the town has what are called 1041 regulatory powers. That's the authority to review actions by entities that normally are not subject to review by a local government, such as ERWSD, and to run them through a process called, it involves matters of statewide importance. And the legislation has a list of things that are of statewide importance, and that includes major expansion of water lines, construction of reservoirs, and constructions of new water treatment plants. So we have two kind of vehicles related to 1041. We have in our agreement with, we have an agreement with the RWSD. When it became clear that Battle was going to sell the reservoir parcel to ERWSD, the town undertook a separate set of negotiations with the RWSD to resolve the town's concerns about how having that reservoir and some of the associated things that we thought would come from that reservoir would play out. And that in that document, we create a memorandum of understanding of the things, the 1041 requirements that ERWSD has to the town. What we're saying in this agreement is that beyond those requirements that we've already worked through with the ERWSD, we are not going to undertake a additional 1041 review of the construction of the water plant itself. And the logic there, I think, is kind of twofold. One is we have a contract that says they have to build this. In other words, we've already said, you're not connected to our plant. You're going to have to develop another one. And we will have kind of recognized that. And so why investigate its necessity one more time when we're the ones telling you you have to build it. The other item is that the town has through some covenants that it will be enacting, as well as a development agreement that will come before the council as part of kind of the whole package of what Battle's doing. We will have a series or a system of restrictions as to what can and cannot be done with the water treatment plant. And the most salient limitation is, without further town consideration, which would include 1041 consideration, they cannot serve more than 250 units and 50,000 square feet of lawn and garden from that water treatment plant. That's the limit. If they go beyond that limit, they then have to come to us for 1041 review. I would add that under the agreement that ERWSD has with Battle Mountain, under that agreement, they can serve up to 700 what are called SFEs, a single family equivalent. But they can't build 700 residential units in Battle Mountain because they're capped at the 250. Now, those two, those 250 units could all have a whole lot of lawn and garden because they have these extra SFEs service that they're entitled to get. Some of those SFEs could be used for parks, for other public improvements, as well as in the commercial area. So it's not necessarily a one-for-one transaction, because they could choose to allocate more SFEs to individual homes and businesses being built in the Bolts Lake area, so long as they don't go over 250 residential units and 50,000 square feet of lawn and garden. So just a little nuanced point there.
So with the 1041 exception, as it's written right now in the new ordinance, it leads off with 1040, like it's exempt from 1041. Is there any opportunity that any of the other utilities underneath our 1041 could misinterpret that and think that all of these parcels are exempt from 1041?
I see what you're saying. I think that would be hard because the second sentence says per code section 162540-8, development and operation of the Bolts water treatment system will be fully exempt from all review and permitting requirements. We don't exempt anything beyond the Bolts Lake water, or the Bolts water treatment system from 1041 powers. And again, except as we otherwise have already entered into an IGA with ERWSD, which was specific to the reservoir.
So then when we do the zoning of these parcels, the rest of the 1041, the utilities covered underneath there would not be exempt, or do you want to go back and?
I feel very comfortable that they would not be exempt. And, you know, for a subdivision like this, you know, the next thing that would be triggered by 1041 powers would be a fairly high electric transmission line, which is specifically not referenced in these documents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then next, when the parcels potentially change, would that change your answer to that question?
Because the exemption is specific to defined facilities. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. I think let's move over to section 5, the zoning code amendments. This really is the meat of the code amendments that are being considered. There are a number of definitions here. We may run across them, so let's talk real quickly about a few of them. The battle retained parcels, those are the areas of land under the settlement agreement the battle would continue to own. The restricted parcels are parcels that battle may initially own but convey perhaps to a homeowners association or a metro district. We'll talk briefly about metro districts, but that would be subject to having covenants recorded against them as to what could or could not be done on those parcels. That's something we're working on right now with battle. And then the town parcels are those parcels of land that would come to the town. The Bolts concept plan is actually an exhibit in this document. Tim has some larger, it's okay.
I can put them up on the screen.
That would be great. When we get to that point, we'll put the concept plan up on the screen. It's kind of hard to see on the paper itself. Those are the main definitional. Oh, temporary processing area, because this is something we're going to talk about. Involves the placement. Let's see, means together with the placement site described below, an area used for processing and temporary storage of soil, gravel, minerals, rock, sand, and similar materials immediately adjacent and from an immediate adjacent site for the purpose of processing placement on another immediate adjacent site. What that means is when ERWSD excavates out the reservoir, there's going to be a lot of material. That material is going to go to a parcel that's identified as the processing area. That is a parcel of land that Battle Mountain will own, but that the town ultimately has an option to acquire the ownership of that for $1. Once it's all finished up. And then what happens is, so the stuff, material gets taken out of the reservoir as it's being built, it gets moved to the processing site for processing, temporary processing. And then it gets spread across the OTP, the old tailings pile. That is the EPA approved form of remediation for that property, is to have a sufficient cap of non-contaminated earth on top of it. And that earth is going to come out of the bottom of the reservoir. And in order to get it at the component levels of what's needed to properly cap that, there will have to be some processing done. So I'm sure some rock crushing and big equipment utilization and things that for a little while will be noisy and a little dusty. So we're going to talk about that with some more detail, however. So as we go on, there are 3 existing character areas. Actually, there's 4 existing character areas that were created as part of the original Bolts Lake development. The Willow Creek, the Rock Creek, the Holy Cross character areas, and then the Bolts Lake character area. What is important to know about these changes is that they do not affect anything on the opposite side of Highway 24. That land is all subject to an approval done in 2017 called the Mountaintop Approvals, which creates very low density lots, by which I mean like 35 acres or larger in size. They're very big. And that totality of that property to the east of Highway 24 is owned by a single investor gentleman. The 4th character area, which was the former Bolts Lake character area, is pretty much what we're rezoning through these code changes, with one small exception. The reservoir parcel will continue to be zoned Bolts Lake character area. And the reason why is that property, as of with the zoning that was performed, or that was granted for this property back in 2008, reservoir activities and construction are considered a use by right for that land. And we cannot, without ERWSD's consent, change that zoning. So we're leaving that historic zoning in place in only one location, and that's at the reservoir site itself. Everything else around the reservoir site is going to get changed into some new zone districts, which we're going to walk through. If we look at 1610.525, and Tim, maybe this is a good time to put this up on the screen.
Do I have to be a panelist now?
This shows the concept plan, which has been vetted with the town. And I think when it's a little larger, it's helpful to see the breakout of where the various zone districts go, because when you look at it, actually, of the totality of the property owned by Battle Mountain, there's not a lot of property zoned for development remaining with the implementation of the concept plan. And we'll kind of go through that here once Tim gets this up on the screen.
Can I just ask a clarification
Sure.
question? Because I was looking, I think, a little sideways at the map. So you said like the Holy Cross character area, the Rock Creek character area, and the Willow Creek character area. Those are the ones that are 35 acres, correct? And they're all owned by the same, that whole
Bill,
No names,
Some guy
but
named
it's
Phil.
just single owner across. all
single
those-
owner across.
Across all those character areas. Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. All the zoning that we did on that doesn't change.
For the, on the mountaintop, no, the mountaintop is wholly
What it was.
disconnected from what you're considering today. Yeah. No changes to that whatsoever, yeah.
So when you join, if you will mute your speakers and turn your.
Okay.
So on the paper, you can see, there's 4 different colors down there. The yellow is the property that will be conveyed upon a successful closing under the settlement agreement to the town, and the kind of polygon that goes the furthest to the west, it's kind of a, oh, there we go. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, that's the where Tim's cursor is. Let's go to the Highlands.
Big yellow area here.
That's the Highlands, and that's, am I remembering, that's like about 50 acres?
60, I believe.
60, okay. If you go to the east of that, next to the hatch lines is a parcel of land just up from the OTP that's yellow. Yep, right there. That's the town's Bolts Lake parcel. It's contiguous with the lake. And we have negotiated an agreement with the RWSD to give us some limited recreation rights on the lake. And that parcel, we think will eventually be used primarily for, will be used in part. Has the possibility to be used.
But so that does immediately adjoin a Bolts Reservoir, and it has some great overlook areas to the reservoir. What we do anticipate that Mike is referencing is the OTP, which is that purple section of land in the middle that will be remediated over the next many years through the fill that will be taken out of Bolts Reservoir. The very left of that parcel to the north where Tim's cursor is the processing area. That's where all what Mike has been discussing, and that's where all the fill will go initially to be crushed and sorted, and anything else that occurs that I don't know about. And then it will be placed over the extent of the OTP, and Tim knows infinitely more about this than I do, but to the point where it becomes the proper grade so that the water can drain off correctly. Is that right, Tim? In a variety of different ways that we deem suitable for our needs. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, the
It can
main,
happen in a lot of different ways.
yes, I mean, there's no,
One way,
exactly,
Right.
you could have a landscape architect.
right?
design.
But so it gets to the point that the parcel will become remediated to the extent that the EPA deems it viable for human use. Which is really exciting because that parcel is not able to be trespassed on right now. So that parcel, that OTP parcel and the processing area to the north is where the Minturn is very interested in having public access to the reservoir with potentially a dock and maybe a little like boat launch area and, a little pavilion area perhaps. These are all things to go through a public process to see what the public would want to do. But that's the area where we would look to have public access to the reservoir, pending what ERWSD does when they are building the reservoir. All of it is depending on how the reservoir gets built, which is of course, #1 priority is the building of the reservoir. And I don't want to take over the discussion, but I do just want to point out on that Highlands parcel, which Mike has pointed out is very high value. There's a line going through that parcel that Tim's showing right there. That that line is actually owned by ERWSD. So I just want to make clear to everyone, that's a 40-foot wide line that is actually Bolt's Ditch. And that is where, from the Bolt's Ditch head gate, there's wetlands going through the parcel, and that's where water would be gravity fed from the Bolt's Ditch head gate through that ditch back down to the reservoir itself. So the parcel itself is split into two per se. So just want to make sure that that's clear to everyone. Sorry.
Although there are access rights across that parcel
Yes.
to connect the north and the south side with each other.
Correct.
Thank you, Michelle. You will note if you go along Highway 24 on the river, there's a couple of triangular yellow parcels. Tim's got his cursor on those. Because those are on the river, the town thought it would be good to acquire those as just part of public access to the river. And then far to the to the north, that's the land adjacent to the Minturn Fitness Center that the town would obtain. And these are all referred to as a holding zone. And the reason is that before the town can make any determinations about how that those parcels should be used, we're going to go through a public process. So the public can chime in and say, this is what we think. So for now, it's merely a holding zone, no real uses by right on it. But in the next couple of years, planning process to discuss how the community can best benefit from this element of the land exchange. The pink or purplish parcels, those are parcels which will continue to be held by Battle Mountain or a successor, which we think is going to be a metropolitan district, but that are subject to covenant restrictions. And with respect to the OTP, which is again the one to the south, that the town would have the right to acquire the fee ownership of that parcel once the remediation has been completed. So the CTP, because it has ongoing maintenance requirements, is not a facility that we think the town should own. It's gonna forever or for a long time be subject to EPA jurisdiction. And that also partially extends into part of the wetlands area. But again, we will have covenants restricting what can and cannot be done on both the CTP and within the wetlands area. That will both protect the town as well as allow Battle Mountain and its successor to do what it needs to do with respect to fulfilling EPA obligations. What I would point out is when you look at all that, and then the hatch mark space, that's the reservoir. Again, that's staying Bolt's Lake Character Area Zone District. And when you look at this, there are 3 small green parcels. That's the Bolt's Residential District, and there's some small swaths of blue. That's the Bolt's Multi-Use District. And when you look at that as a percentage of the total area that is the Bolt's Lake area, my guess is that's about 35% of the total area off the top of my head. So in other words, the amount of land that was contemplated to be developed under the original agreements, which constituted most of this property, is going to decrease dramatically as to what this developer owner can do if these code changes are adopted. Okay. So real quick, let's run through the zone districts. I'm going to put Scott Hunt on notice. You're going to be up next, buddy.
On the map,
Yes.
at the end, and I think I just, it's the school district property, so it's adjacent to like parcel, it looks like parcel 11, 9 and 13, it's that little yellow sliver down here, that's all of the school district property?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything to the west of that is all school district.
Thank you.
So, Bolt's residential zone district, again, this is green, characterized by low-density, single-family residences and duplexes. And then the related public improvements that serve them. The Bolt's mixed-use zone district, characterized by residential and low-impact commercial uses. So vertical integration is encouraged, where you might have a multi-story building with some level of residential on the bottom, or I'm sorry, residential on the top, commercial on the bottom. It enables a denser development, which Scott will get into when we get down to the dimensional use table. Then we have Bolt's open space and recreational zone. Again, there will be open spaces as part of what Battle Mountain or its successors desire to implement. So we have a zone district for open space. And then the Bolt's holding zone, this is the town parcels. And there's no uses attached to it. It simply is, we'll plan for it here in the next year to 2 years as to what to do with it. Okay. The use table, I will tell you, this was taken primarily from the town's existing use table as it pertained to residential and multi-use zone districts already existing within the town. The uses by right, not by right, and I think we have a couple very small conditional uses that are included in here, are very consistent with what otherwise is allowed in similar zone districts in town. The one item I wanted to call out to you is, again, the temporary processing area. The town had strongly recommended that this be a conditional use for processing, because processing can be kind of invasive. Big trucks turning on in the morning and motoring around, and rock crushers and dust and vibration. And what Battle Mountain has proposed is that we address some of those issues through a covenant that will be recorded against the processing area and the OTP. The communication we've given back is that we need to get working on that covenant. So by the time we get to council, there's a good understanding of what that covenant would allow. From my perspective, the message I gave to Battle Mountain is it's going to be pretty similar to a conditional use approval, because we have to have a site plan. We can't just approve a bunch of uses without knowing how it lays out and where the potential impacts are to town roads and other parcels of land owned by people within the town. And so there's going to be some, as I foresee it, some limitations in the covenant that talk about what can and cannot be done, but there will have to be a secondary process by which it comes to the town council to review. So that's my take on doing that as a matter of covenant, which makes it, to be all honest, not all that different than a conditional use. So, yes, Michael.
I can't see great, so is it okay if I go up there for a minute?
I can
Just
go
ask
ahead.
the question? I can get my bearings here. This is the rec center here.
Yeah, the yellow, next to the yellow.
This is Molloy Park Road. This is where it's-
Oh, that's-
That's the.
oh, that's
parking lot.
Molloy
That's the
Park Road.
school. The rec center is right there.
Oh, okay, so this. So basically, I'm sure that, access to these areas, and to my understanding, like some of this has to be mitigated before it's actually valuable or for us to purchase. The question is, like all this stuff is pretty much ready if the deal is finalized, that stuff's ready to go. And the stuff over here that needs a lot of work and a lot of money put into it. Basically, maybe a two-part question. Something to think about, something to think is there. I mean, do you have that time tied together in some sort of timeline or a time or something to think about? But we don't have to have an answer right now, but to guarantee that this gets mitigated, so we actually have value in what's being offered to us. Versus that all getting developed and this taking 25 years.
So the first question is, or that I think you implied, we have, at the time of closing on this settlement, we will get easements across the old tailing pile to access the Highlands. So the legal right of access will exist with implementation of the settlement. As to the remediation of the OTP site, and I'm gonna have to lean on Tim a little bit for this, but I believe in our agreements with the district and authority, we've given them 20 years. This is off the top of my head, but I think it's 20 years that they have to come in and build the reservoir site without having to go through the 1041 permitting process. Otherwise, this agreement we have with them lapses. Additionally, I don't think the Battle has a timeline as to when the reservoir has to be built, but there is a collective set of obligations that the material be made available to Battle Mountain for processing. And in fact, you're gonna have to describe this, Tim, but there's then an agreement back that you will utilize it for the remediation of the OTP, and correct me where my memory is not 100%.
Yeah, I actually think we do have some timelines with the district that they have to build the reservoir. Can't recall them off the top of my head. The remediation of that land will happen before the reservoir is complete, because they've got to take all the soil out of the reservoir bottom and they need to put it on the OTP. So in my last conversation, I think the district is very, they'd like to see that reservoir built as soon as they can. So that's my understanding. And so
They have told us that it's probably a 7 to 8 to 9 year timeline to build that. I mean, there's a lot of hoops they have to go through.
yeah,
to build
but I think that was from
reservoir.
when we closed, or, so we're in there.
Yeah.
They've done a lot of their design, but in any event, and they've agreed to pay to place the soil on the OTP. So it's gotta be placed, the costs are all covered. We're the ones who are gonna physically manage the contract to do it, but the district is doing it as part of the reservoir. And like, one of the reasons with that temporary processing area, we do feel that when the district comes in to get their permits for the reservoir, which they still need to do some work with you guys to get the permits, this would be included within that, because it's integral to that process. They have to take the soil out and they have to put it somewhere. So we would, hours of operation, all that stuff. We also have to do a work plan that has to be approved by the EPA, to put the soil on that area. That also needs to be recorded with the EPA. They have to approve it and allow how we want to put the soil on there to make sure it does what Michelle says, which is allow, you could build houses on that property afterward, after it's mitigated. So although there's not a specific timeline, Mike, I do think it'll happen with the reservoir. It's kind of one of the first steps of the reservoir construction, because they have to dig it out first before they build the dam and all the other stuff. So I would think it'll happen in the next, 5 years or so.
So yeah, it's just, like, it's hard to see the maps of the paper. So the bigger yellow section at the bottom, the Highlands that, technically we will get down the road, that, I guess what I'm asking is do we have access to that area prior?
Yes,
to the remediation being done?
Yes.
So it's of value to us.
You could use it day one. We have agreements both with the district. To allow, because Tigawan Road runs, you know, right along here. So we have the ability to put an access road, and it's actually a requirement, as Mike said, that we have. Provide access to that parcel. At closing, so there'd be an easement or something that would give the town access to.
So that's of value to us right out of the gate.
Yes, it would, someone could develop it or use it or get out there.
Yeah. Okay, no, yeah, it's just a lot of maps, hard to see.
And we're getting title insurance for that parcel. That will include the legal right of access as one of the insured conditions.
I have faith, I just didn't understand completely, it's a lot of maps.
I have a really stupid question. Is there any chance you guys can develop those swaths of green to the very far? Without the reservoir?
If we have a water plant. The reservoir is not,
Independent of the water plant?
yeah, it's independent of the reservoir. All the development is independent of the reservoir. None of it's independent of a water system.
ERWSD has a wide-ranging portfolio of water rights, which does include storage in Eagle Park Reservoir. And if they conclude that they could use that portfolio without Holtz Lake to start or to build a water treatment plant, that's up to them. Because they're the ones who will be enforced against by the division engineer, so. We're not our problem.
So it's not their only source of water.
It's not their only source of water,
No.
but like our ownership of the purple is.
We don't own, the way I
We don't
understand,
own it until it gets remediated.
we have the option to own it. Is what I-
Once it, yeah. You're right.
The yellows are what,
The yellow is what we get, and again, for our parcels.
Yeah.
So the town's land, we have to provide water to it, and as you know, we're in a bit of a water pinch ourselves. And so, you know, the amount of development or usage that could occur on those parcels will have to be factored into the town's own water availability. Yes.
Is there a possibility that that land could have wells?
The Highlands could have wells, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not below it because of contamination issues.
Okay.
but the green and the blue is definitely slated. to be developed.
The green and the blue, I did, yeah,
That's
that's what I'm
right.
wondering, but and that's not what saying, that's not, it's independent of the reservoir.
The reservoir is just like Eagle, ERWSD's.
I would clarify, Jeff, that any of this blue that's adjacent to the reservoir site. Likely couldn't be developed to the reservoirs done, because the reservoir would just be too impactful. To have houses there during reservoir construction, I think.
But it's slated to go sometime.
Eventually.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna go through 1610.5-80. Then I'm gonna turn the time over to Scott to talk about 1610.590, which gets into some kind of real planning concepts.
I have one last question on you said that we lifted and shifted. Like the mixed use zone descriptions, everything from current code.
Maybe not so much the definitions, but the use table, the types of uses that can go in those zone districts was lifted from the town's existing matrix of uses in those types of zone districts. So section 1610.5-70 comes from town code. Now, we tweaked some of the rights, non-rights, you know, where conditional use needed to be included. A little bit in that table, but more or less that is lifted from other parts of the town code.
So as we go through, we're going through code 16 update, this is going to amend. Could we potentially, when we update the code 16 in the future, then have discrepancies between what we're approving tonight with the Battle Mountain? Because now if we make updates, it won't match per se.
So this will definitely be in. Where this ends up in chapter 16 is up to the town. Like if we parse it out between different sections and how it's written today, we can do that to make so that our code makes sense. A lot of the work you're doing on the chapter 16 code rewrites is to try and create a more unified code that you're not flipping back and forth all the time. And, you know, it reads in a more logical way. That being said, there will be a development agreement that gets passed as part of the approvals for Battle Mountain, which will have certain of these code sections attached to it that gives Battle what are called vested rights. That is the right to be able to develop in conformance with what we're approving for a specific period of time. And we have been talking to them for that period of time would be 20 years. So where this ends up in the code, up to us. The substance of what certain of these code provisions says will be a part of a vested right that Battle Mountain receives as the approval of the land use approvals. So.
Just then is what we're designating, what is what we're talking about. We're talking about just then.
Yeah.
This deal with then. Anything else is down the road.
That any other changes you make to the land use code would be of general applicability and might have some applicability to Battle Mountain, but would primarily be, you know, the work you're doing is to try and tidy up and bring into the 21st century your code for the rest of the town. All right, so I'm gonna do 80. Scott's gonna do 90. I just real quickly in 80 wanted to make note that we have a couple of specific definitions for calculating density. In 1 and 2, number 1 is for the protection of the town. And it essentially says that if we're talking about the definition of a dwelling unit, it is a single family home, it is an accessory dwelling unit to another home, it is a half of a duplex, it is an apartment. And so if Battle or its successor were to choose to develop more densely with smaller units, a unit is a unit is a unit. Okay, that's for the benefit of the town because we have negotiated a cap of 250 dwelling units can go into Battle Mountain. Size doesn't matter. If you have a separate unit, that's what that counts towards your 250. The second is a definition for purpose of calculating commercial density that identifies what goes into that calculation and what is excluded. Excluded are kind of common areas, entryways, stairwells, cleaning closets, elevator shafts. Those are excluded, which does mean that the building square footage of commercial buildings could be potentially more than 50,000 square feet. Could be something in addition to that for these non-included areas. And to be honest, I don't mind that because if there are creative ways to cite neighborhood appropriate commercial uses that can bring some additional tax revenue to this town in this area, having some flexibility to do that is in the town's best interest. So, but that is a Battle specific definition that would not apply to anybody else in town unless if you as part of your future rewrite said this is a good idea, but you don't have to make that decision today. That's something down the road. And then again, we talked a little bit about this 250 dwelling unit cap. If a spa and wellness center is developed within the Bolts Lake area, that cap actually goes down to 225 units. The idea there was that one of the concerning factors about density in this area is traffic impacts. And if you've got a spa that's bringing people in and bringing people out, the total number of residential units should go down to kind of compensate for traffic impacts that could occur. So, Scott, section 90.
Good evening. Sorry I can't be with you guys. I've got COVID in the house, so I am here. And Mike, I'm not sure what you and Tim want me to go through with this. I guess, you know, the only thing I would have to say is after working through not only the table of uses, but these dimensional standards, like you said, with regard to the table of uses, very similar, lifted from our existing code, our existing table of uses. Same thing here, particularly after speaking with Tim last week about just a couple items with regard to lot and impervious coverage and setbacks. I think Tim, speak up, but I think you did a really nice job of kind of mirroring or matching what's already in our code. There's a couple exceptions, you know, you'll see in this table under minimum lot area for the Bolts mixed use district. The minimum lot area is 2,500 for residential uses. That's a little bit smaller than what we would normally allow for residential uses. We certainly allow for that lot size in some of our commercial zone districts. When you get to maximum lot coverage and maximum impervious coverage, 50 and 60%, again, very similar to what we already permit for most residential or mixed use zone districts. 45 and 55 is where we're at with most residential zone districts. You see an 80 and 90% lot and impervious coverage total. That is consistent with commercial zone districts in the town already. And then a 28-foot building height limit across the board, except for commercial, which would be 35 feet. And then lastly, the front, rear, and side yard setbacks, I think those almost to a T match what we're already regulating in town in other zone districts. Mike, are any of these, I'm thinking of the 35-foot height limit, are those spelled out in the settlement agreement? I think some of these were actually.
They were items that we agreed to allow to come before P and Z and council for consideration. But as indicated, they're recommendations where the town is not bound by this for an approval. So if there's something in there that, you know, one of you wants to flesh out with Scott about how that results in development on a lot, this would be a good time to do that.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but isn't our current height for commercial buildings in town capped at 32 feet? And we were going back and forth about the 100 block with 32 and 34 and 35. And I thought we settled on 32. I don't really recall, but I don't recall anywhere in town that we allow 35, but personally, I don't have a problem with it, especially because this is, it's kind of so far south of town, and I just don't mind the extra 3 feet, frankly.
Yeah, you're correct, Jeff. It was either 32 or with a bonus floor, it maybe got up above 32, but it was only for the 100 block A, I believe.
But again, like I said, I don't have a problem.
Were there, and I apologize because I'm not the expert in these spaces, but were there, when we were starting to go through this table, were there any of the items like the impervious coverage or building lot coverage that we've already started to discuss with our rewrite?
Yeah, ours are different, somewhat different, but I believe that and Mike clarified, I think that this is designated just for them, and we can debate about the rest of the town.
But once we approve this though, and we change the other, won't sync this back to if we update the other.
I probably,
Yeah, that's what I was,
that would be a different.
It would be a separate dimensional use table, I think, that would stand on its own for ballot.
That's right.
For 20 years, you said, or what was the agreement?
Well, it could be longer than 20 years. It's just they have a vested rights period for, and we haven't completely hammered it out, but 20 years is what the town, I think, is shooting.
Amanda, your question kind of touched on some of the work that we may have done previously. We did take a look 2.5, 3 years ago at dimensional limitations, and based on some of that work, we did come forward to council with changes to lot coverage and impervious coverage for certain zone districts that actually got approved. And those went from 40 to 45 and 50 to 55 to increase lot coverage in certain instances and in certain districts. But yeah, this would kind of be its own set of dimensional limitations just for this area. And then Jeff, I did confirm looking at Appendix B that the max height with a bonus floor with the conditions that need to be made or met could be up to 35 feet in the 100 block A.
But that's the only spot in town, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Scott?
You
On
may.
the graph, or what do you call it, the table, I'm sorry, where it says Bolt's open space and Bolt's holding zone, why is the only thing that's defined in there the height? Why does it say 28 feet, but nothing else? Front, back, setback, building lot coverage, surface area?
Mike and Tim jump in, but I think the thought here is that those will be further defined with site-specific development plans. Or why are those NA?
Especially the Bolt's open space and recreational zone.
where is that, Lynn?
It's page 25 down at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, so things that might go into like the open space and recreational zone would be park areas, pavilions. I mean, I guess we could put some setbacks in there, but usually you're gonna locate those things at a vantage point or, somewhere that isn't necessarily right on the edge next to other property owners, but
So it would be kind of like the space for restrooms and open space at the top of Vale Pass.
an option for what might go in there. But I don't, yeah, it's a good point. I don't have a problem with us putting in the Bolt's open space and rec zone, some minimum setbacks similar to, or even a little bit greater than what we've done here. The Bolt's holding zone, there's no uses until we go through some planning. So nothing can be built up there. And as part of that planning process, we'll revamp those setback requirements to be consistent with what the goals are for that property.
But then would it be appropriate to remove the 28 foot, but NA?
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. Good observation.
I would probably redo the same for the open space until we have these areas defined. Would that not be appropriate and just add in the other setbacks?
I would prefer, so they're never gonna have, there's like minimum lot area, I'm not really worried about. Building lot coverage, there shouldn't be much. Impervious surface, it's mostly open space with some trails. So I would leave, because there might be a pavilion, right? You might fund a nice pavilion out there. Well, how tall should that be? 28 feet sounds pretty reasonable. I would add some front, rear, and side setback limits here. We can use the ones that are in here, but I would go with at least 20, 10, and 10. Because these are bigger parcels than lots.
How about on the open space and the holding? How about, can you think of a better word than all uses for the term? Because,
Let me say defined.
yeah, because all like technically could be a house.
Yeah.
Or all could be a.
And they have within the use table that it's what's defined that they can and cannot do on those lots. Yeah. And again, I'm totally open to us including some setbacks for the Holtz open space district.
Do we have setbacks on some of our other recreational properties?
No, but that's probably something you'll be talking about in the near future.
We're gonna be working on that.
Well, I mean, and setbacks, when you think about the town's other, open spaces like Little Beach Park.
Little Beach, that's what I was.
It's that pavilion and those facilities are so far from the property boundary that it's kind of a moot thing, and they're not the dominant feature on the land, but I think having some limit is an appropriate thing to do.
I think the all things,
Fine. You certainly are not gonna go to the house, but if you put a pavilion up there, which would be nice if you had a wedding or something. Probably have to have some. Something.
Mike, I just looked at your use table and all your other recreational uses within zoning districts. You don't have setbacks, you actually have to be determined as part of conditional use review, so I assume they're just conditional uses.
Or site plan. I mean, they would generally come in with some kind of site plan. But if you have a recommendation, certainly.
I think we should do what the other, like,
Okay.
to me it would be, but I'm not the only person. The other ones have like a conditional use TV. So that would be
instead of the all, or
instead of the NA.
Because there would be a site plan review or there would be a conditional use review, so we can add that language.
I missed it, Mike. What did you say we were gonna do with the all?
Well, the all goes to defined because it's the
Oh,
uses are
okay, yes,
defined.
I see what you're, because it's already spelled out.
It's already spelled out.
Another page
Mhm.
of everything else.
And then for the dimensional limits, building height, front, rear, and side setbacks, we're gonna replace that with to be determined at time of site plan or conditional use review.
Perfect.
Scott, do you have any other observations on that section?
No, not at this time.
We do have a slight tweak to Appendix B. Appendix B to the code is the site plan review section. It makes the Bolts Lake area only subject to sections 1 and 2 of the Appendix B standards. The reason why is subsection 3 is specific to the 100 block, so it just doesn't apply. The subdivision code amendments, the big thing here with the subdivision code that you need to be aware of is we are giving Battle Mountain the ability to do something that no other landowner in Minturn gets to do. And that is to process what are called exemption plat parcels. And an exemption plat is a plat of a parcel of land that is at least 5 acres in size. So you can't create a 2,500 square foot lot using this parcel. It's for bigger parcels. But it is done through a administrative process where a plat gets submitted together with some more rudimentary technical information. And that it gets reviewed and approved by the town planning department. And what is important to understand about once an exemption plat is created, it has both a plat note on it as well as a condition in the code that says any parcel created through the exemption plat process cannot be developed for any use until it has gone through either a further subdivision process or through a site plan review process. And both of those processes, as anchored in your code, require the developer to then go through the impacts analysis, dedication requirements, infrastructure requirements that have to be completed in order to have the development work. So this exemption plat process does not allow the developer to go willy-nilly and create a 5-acre parcel of land and start building houses. What it allows the developer to do is in part to implement the settlement concept, because as you look at that map with all those different colors, we have to break this property in order to implement the settlement into some different parcels. That's part of what's happening. The town's getting some parcels, Battle's retaining some parcels. Some parcels we need to be able to identify as specific areas because we're gonna have use covenants that are impacting what can be done on the land. And so this gives us the ability to implement the settlement, but it also gives Battle Mountain the ability to carve off some meaningful parcels of land that it could sell to a development partner, who would then go through a further site plan or subdivision process to implement the provisions of the town code to protect residents and to make sure that the plats or the development is being done in conformance with the town code requirements. So that's the big thing that this subdivision code amendments implements. It is different than what can happen anywhere else in town. Want everyone clear on that, but there are some special reasons why this works in this area and why it's needed. And I try to lay that out as to you know, there's just a need for some flexibility in creating parcels that doesn't require, as part of the parcel creation, for somebody to provide a traffic study and a environmental impact review and many of the other requirements that come into our code when you're creating lots. Because that will all come later. It's not omitted. It's just someone can create a 5-acre parcel of land that gets sold that they can develop on, but to get the 5-acre parcel into the hands of the party who will develop it, you don't have to do all these extra things. But the second they decide they want to put a house or anything else on it, they have to come into the town for further subdivision or site plan review. Yes.
And I was listening, and to break it into 5-acre parcels or whatever, staff can break it into whatever the 5-acre parcels are. But if it, in the future, when it comes for the development, it still comes to us.
To you, that's correct.
Whoever's sitting here 25 years from now.
It's still
Question on that process. Does it, if,
5 years, yeah.
when that parcel is conveyed, does it then, because I couldn't find this anywhere in the document or the settlement, but I could have also just missed it. Could that new owner or development partner come back and try to rezone that parcel?
Well, I guess
It's excluded from any of the settlement documentation. That process, is it excluded?
yeah, but I find that kind of unlikely, because under the vested rights provision, we're gonna say to the Battle Mountain developer, we agree not to touch these substantive provisions of your zoning without your approval. And unless they were to give approval for some kind of rezoning, that wouldn't happen.
There'd be no requirement for you to give anyone anything different than what's already there.
That's right.
I mean.
Yeah, yeah, so the
zoning's there.
rezoning process, but I'm just wondering, like 20 years from now, none of us are seeing the table. Don't remember it, like.
But it will be subject to what's both in the zoning and the development agreement of the cap of 250 units. And
Okay,
Oh, it will be, okay.
okay, okay.
so once that 250 is used up, you can come in and ask for rezoning all you want. You're not allowed over 250. And the use of the water treatment plant within this area, what you see on this map, doesn't allow for more than 250.
Okay. That's what holds it together.
They operate in tandem with each other, yeah. So the plats, these, oh, Jeff,
So, just on that same note. Since what we're looking at now theoretically could get with the whole process with the plat exemption. You know, downstream from this, some parcels could start getting carved out. They could be sold. They could be partnered. You could partner with somebody to develop those. At that time, when they're sold or when they're parceled off, does Tim or are they going to have to specify, let's say, how many water taps go with that parcel?
Yeah.
Like, so that the person buying it, I guess, would know what their potentially gonna
contributions to bigger picture infrastructure that has to be developed. That we're kind of leaving that in Tim's
get. Right, I
court.
mean, that's what I'm saying.
But a smart developer is going to make sure they're not leaving all the obligations on themselves while selling off some parcels.
Yeah, for sure.
Cause that's kind of unique as well.
So the answer is yes, and that's something we've internally talked with Battle Mountain about, yeah. I would note, every one of these exemption plats has to have on it a language that the town of Minturn has no obligation whatsoever to provide it with water service. Because that's the deal. The deal is URWSD is gonna do that. That's kind of, and then section 17.680 is kind of the mechanics of how this exemption plat process works. You know, again, they do a pre-application meeting, they meet with Scott or Madison. They submit an application, it gets reviewed pursuant to some pretty limited criteria that, you know, is applicable to creating an exemption plat. They have to provide kind of some of the standard subdivision information, a title commitment. They have to demonstrate that there's legal access, legal and physical access to the parcel they want to create. You can't just create some random parcel out in the middle of nowhere that you can't get to. It's got to legally fit together.
And Mike, just this map you're looking at is the exemption plat we're preparing. So there's 16 parcels here. They're different colors, but these will, the parcels that will be either conveyed at settlement or maybe sometime after settlement if the town decides to take that option. But this is gonna be the exemption plat. It's these 16 parcels.
Okay, thank
So
you. Jeff.
you're not separating all the smaller 5.
No, there's no plan to do that.
That's, you know, that's kind of, we're still talking with the town engineer. We have a list of final plat requirements that gets into something called monumentation. That's when the surveyor actually puts physical, either stone or metal monuments in the ground. That may be something we forego to when they come in for either site plan or subdivision review, because the possibility exists that the exact boundaries of one of these exemption parcels gets moved a little bit over here, over there, and it doesn't make sense to monument things until you're sure that's the parcel that's going to be developed. Yeah. That kind of gets me through, I think, the proposals to change the subdivision code. Any questions on that?
I'm gonna ask a stupid question. Obviously. So we approve it, goes to council. Until all the documents are signed. Well, it's not approved for them.
That is correct, that the way that this settlement is structured, what we approve, including up at the council, it's all contingent. Like, we're not gonna take it down to the recorder until all of the contingencies in the settlement agreement have been successfully resolved. And some of those are for the protection of the town, where we're working with environmental consultants to make sure that what we're doing and what we're getting is appropriate for the town to take ownership of. Battle Mountain wants to make sure that the final process or the final verbiage of not only these code changes, but some further steps in the settlement agreement are to their satisfaction. And then we need to let the protest period go by. You know, there's under state law, there's timelines in which someone could pull a referendum or file a lawsuit, and that has happened in the past with regard to this property. So we are leaving open that could happen again. But once those periods have expired and both sides have resolved their contingencies with each other, at that point, this deal closes. And it's kind of odd to speak of public improvements as part of a deal, but it is part of a settlement structure. And once we get to the point where we have potentially approved the various public enactments that are in conformance with what's in the settlement agreement, and again, the town and Battle Mountain have worked through their respective diligence periods, we would then kind of close this as any other commercial or residential closing. We'll go to the title company and bring a bunch of documents, and deeds will change hands, and ordinances will get recorded, and off to the races.
So what's the good timeline and the bad timeline?
I kind of foresee that we're gonna be into early summer to where we would have everything approved and the due diligence finished. And then we've got to provide for the time for the protest periods to pass.
So like 10 years.
Not 10 years. Sometimes towards the latter part of the summer of 2024.
His kids are already 14 years old. That means they do around this.
Questions about subdivision? Okay. On the final section, which deals with the building codes, I would just note that, you know, these were small little changes that we saw to try and bring what we have in place in conformance with the provisions specific to Battle Mountain. And I don't know, there's really even that much substance there to discuss. They're just kind of little nits that we're bringing into conformance. So with that, we do have here the person who really has the most knowledge about the on the ground circumstances of Battle Mountain, and otherwise a very good understanding of the code amendments that we're bringing to you. On Zoom, we have legal counsel for Battle Mountain, Muncie Ayers and Lindsay Lyda are both on the line to provide you all with additional information. And Tim, if there's just some thoughts you want to convey, this is your opportunity to do it. And then we'll do a question and answer with the developer, after which point we will move to take public comment.
You know, I don't really have anything to add, Mike. I think you and Scott made a great presentation. Again, I'm sure there's a lot to go through. We've looked at this for a while, so it's clear in my mind, but I'm sure there's a lot of questions on your end, so I'll just respond to questions.
Do we want to let Muncie and Lindsay, if they're uncomfortable with anything I've said in my presentation?
Hey, Mike, this is Muncie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Not uncomfortable with anything that you said. there may be just a couple of sort of minor non-substantive clarifications I might make. And one goes to the first question I recall coming from a planning commission member, which had to do with that fifth recital and the way that it's drafted. And the point that I would make there is that the recital is intended to be accurate as of the date that it becomes that the ordinance becomes effective. So when it talks about planning commission and town council study sessions and public meetings and such, it's talking about things like what's happening tonight having occurred as of the time that the thing becomes effective.
Thank you.
So that's one little minor point. On that temporary processing area discussion on the restrictive covenant mechanism, I think that this may have come across, but the main point there is that everything that happens there, once the reservoir construction starts and the materials start being moved into the processing area and processed out for placement on the OTP, all of that must comply with the approved work plan that EPA and CDPHE have reviewed and approved. And so that those activities must comply with that. So our objective from the Battle Mountain side is to get as clear as we can about how to address that along with other town concerns that Mike mentioned now, rather than having it be any more open to interpretation and such later on, when the work is actually needing to be done. And so to address the things that the town's concerned about, get them in place as much as possible now, by which I mean at the time that the settlement is fully implemented, while at the same time recognizing that we have to comply with the approved work plan. And on the question about a timeline for Eagle River Water and Sand District to start or complete the reservoir, under the agreement that we have with them, which I'll refer to as the reservoir agreement, there is no Eagle River Water and Sand has no obligation to commence or complete the reservoir at all or with any specified time. So there's some things that relate to timing on that, but they don't really have a contractual obligation to us at all to start the reservoir at any point. So they'll do that when they deem it to be appropriate. And then we'll execute on those things that are related to that, relative to the processing area and any development that may or may not occur adjacent to the reservoir. The discussion about setbacks and stuff for the open space parcels in particular, I don't think we have any concern about putting any kind of reasonable restrictions there, but I would note that when you go through the use chart, essentially all of the uses that are permitted that would involve any vertical structures are either conditional or limited uses, and that those matters could and would be addressed as part of those reviews. The one kind of exception where there are uses by right tend to be public utilities that would be undergrounded, except for the Bolts water treatment plant, and then recreational facilities, which could involve some horizontal structures. And so when we talk about putting in setbacks, it would principally, I think, be directed toward that very small set of vertical improvements that could ever occur on any of those restricted parcels that are zoned Bolts Open Space and Recreational Zone. So those were the only kind of little nits that I had.
Thank you, Muncie.
You're very welcome.
So Ms. Teach, I think opportunity for,
Public,
well, question and answer with the developer. And
okay,
then
for us.
help,
first.
yep.
Ready?
Yeah, I go first. Without getting too far into the weeds. Tim, you said that it's anticipated that some structures could get built on the OTP once it's been fully mitigated. Maybe someday.
Correct. I mean, as long as the mitigation is complete and it's per the EPA and CDPH standards, that removes the restrictions from both recreation and residential use of that area.
Right, so I remember back when the previous owner had that parcel and was doing presentations in here. The OTP was discussed for that same purpose, and I guess my question is, who is engineering the mitigation?
So we would have a consultant, environmental engineer, engineer the mitigation that the EPA and CDPHE would both have to review and approve. And then they would oversee any mitigation that was done. And then they would confirm it was done correctly. And at that point, they would remove the restrictions that are currently on the property.
So that hasn't been done.
No, we have submitted a draft work plan to remediate the OTP to the agencies. Just to make sure that what is being proposed by taking the fill material out of the reservoir and using it to cap the OTP would meet their requirements. They've reviewed it and conditionally approved it, but we still need to submit a final work plan with real engineering and real drawings to them.
And the reason I say that is because, just for you all, is like, back then, I remember looking at a profile. To keep it simple, I don't want to get into the weeds. But there was a profile that was shown at the time that showed the cap of dirt that was going to go on what's there now. And it was, let's just say that the sandwich was only like 3 feet tall. And they were like, you're going to be able to build here someday. And I'm looking at it in my head going, you're going to dig through that to get down to where you're going to have to put your footings. And that's just if you're doing a slab on grade structure, not a basement. But if you have to dig down, let's say 5 or 6 feet to get below the frost line and put your footings in, you're going to have to dig past the cap into the contaminated soil. And my point is just, I want to make sure that we all understand that if we're going to be looking at a big purple piece of property that we might want to buy someday to build on, that the engineers and the mitigation that's going to be done on that property is going to be such that, and the protocol is going to be correct to allow the dirt to be put in a way, you have to have densities and compaction and all kinds of like really technical things to be able to build on it and not just have a big pile of dirt that's not, it looks nice, but maybe it's not ready to build on unless the protocol is done. I'm not inferring that Tim's gonna do it wrong. I'm just saying, like, we have to think about it in those terms and make sure that when the day comes that the engineering is presented, that there are gonna have to be, like, you won't be able to, they may say you can't put a basement there. You can only put a slab on grade structure or whatever.
Does the mitigation plan, do you have to submit what use you would potentially?
No, it just gets approved for any use if it meets the mitigation requirements.
Thank you.
And this is a plan, Jeff, on the screen. It shows Tigawan Road along the bottom.
Yeah.
And this is a fill plan that we did an engineering study of what the fill on top of the OTP would look like. The dark blue areas is over 10 feet of fill.
Already.
No, proposed. This is in order to take what they've estimated needs to come out of the reservoir site and to accommodate it on the OTP. This is what would happen. So the dark blue is over 10 feet. The light blue is between 5 and 8 feet. And the green is 3 feet. So there's so much material. Right now, that OTP is kind of a big bowl. It would actually be a consistent slope from Tigawan Road up to the Highlands. So there'd be places where there'd be well over 20 feet of fill in there. So I understand your concern. I think the remediation we're discussing now, based on the amount of fill available, would alleviate that. I mean, on the periphery, you probably wouldn't be able to develop, but in these areas where there's over 5 to 10 feet of fill, even a frost wall shouldn't go into that.
And you think that they would be putting it in lifts in a way that it would be compacted enough to be structurally sound?
Exactly. That's why the agreement with the district was that the material had to be processed so we could get structural fill out of it. To install in lifts. We specifically required that.
Okay.
In our work.
So that was my first comment. This may be a question for Scott or Tim, you may know the answer to it too, but it's like the density that's being proposed for the multifamily areas. And I guess maybe the residential too. I know it was stated that the residential was like low density. Is the multifamily more like mid density or medium density? Or do we have an idea of how many units per acre it might shake out to, or are we getting the cart before the horse?
I think we're a little cart before the horse because we have really conceptual plans of the area, but they're conceptual. I do think, there's 250 units and there's about there's probably about 80 to 100 acres of developable area. So, you're almost 2 units or 2 units per acre. And that 2 to 3, so it's very low dense for a Minturn.
Yeah. Okay. I think we hit on the CUP stuff for the processing site and how it was gonna kind of be like similar to the other CUPs in town where it's gonna be sort of time bound and reviewed on an annual basis or something. If the processing goes for years, hopefully it doesn't, but if it did, I guess it would be just something that the town council reviews, on some type of a time period.
Yeah.
We talked about the variations for height. I don't have a problem with that. I know you don't want to hear it, Tim, but I got to bring it up anyway, but I'm sure you've talked with Devin Duval or Parks and Wildlife. It's been.
I have. I've had a number of conversations with him about the area. I mean, one of the key things that we did was to create a corridor from this northern side through the wetlands up to the CTP. And again, from the CTP back around here to allow wildlife. I know it looks small on this map, but this is several hundred feet, over several hundred feet to allow animals to get into the wetlands and then go up on the CTP without being right near a house.
I'm sure that all the mountain lion that live down in the processing site is probably gonna have to move, but
well, during the processing for sure, but
yeah,
I know they go up into the Highlands a lot too and and do stuff
I know
there.
there's not a lot we can do about that. I have to bring it up. All right, that's it for me.
But that'll go back.
It'll go back to non-processing site.
No, that was.
Okay.
I was just piggybacking off a little bit of what Jeff said, and I was thinking earlier, just in general, because I don't know the complete process. As far as, meetings a long time ago with looking at, water and the wells and the plume movement, and, all that stuff and, once that's. What's the word, Jeff? Once
Mitigated?
Once, yes, thank you. Once it's all mitigated, and that mitigation is done. Does anybody like certify it, insure it, or once it's part of the town, it's just our issue if it ever. Say, because we all talk 30 or 40 years down the road, 30 or 40 years down the road. Like,
So
do you sell the property or whatever? What guarantees, is there any guarantees to Minturn?
So first of all, yes, once the work is done, the EPA has to certify that it's been done according to the plan and that it's remediated. So there's a process they have to do to check that the work was done. As I said, they will come out and inspect during construction to make sure things are being done right, and then it's certified. And then I believe it's every 5 years the EPA comes out and reviews the site to make sure nothing's being done that's going to jeopardize the mitigation work that's been complete. So they forever, they keep checking it forever.
Like down the road, like if you sell, like say whoever, you sell all your stuff out.
Yeah.
And someone else has it, and then they say 15 years or 20 years down the road, oh, you got an issue over here. I'm just curious, like who's responsible to pay for that?
I don't know for sure the answer to that question, but really the only thing, this remediation, so we're covering the bad dirt with good dirt. So it's designed so that it can erode away. Now, that's not to say some kind of freak nature thing could happen that moves the soil. But it shouldn't ever it's being designed to last forever. And there will be restrictions. You can't dig a 10-foot hole and go back into that dirt, or you or whoever dug that hole is then responsible for that. But the work that's being done is supposed to protect the site forever. Even though there's still contamination there, there'll still be some rules around that land that you have to abide by, or the owner or the future owner has to abide by. If they break those rules, then they would be responsible for that.
Mike, Jeff had brought up, question as far as excavating and the cover, and we found out the height of the fill and Tim, and my question piggybacking off of that is if there was an issue down the road, once it's part of the town, who would be responsible to mitigate it? And Tim, said that they come out and check it every 5 years to make sure everything's good, and we talk about 25 and 30 years down the road. Well, I won't be here in 30 years. I'm not gonna make it that long, but I like to be living here, but I don't know about be breathing, but
Mike,
I just wanted to see, I just asked him like potentially could that fall back on us? No,
and we have engaged some of the best environmental counsel in the state of Colorado to advise us on those issues. And getting the appropriate comfort letters from EPA and any sub-agreements put in place as part of our due diligence.
so the key is just get the best ones you got, and that's what you get.
And again, remember that the town is not a potentially responsible party. We didn't create the contaminants there. CBS Viacom, it's not even Battle Mountain. CBS Viacom is the party that has responsibility to the EPA. The goals of remediation of the property by Battle Mountain pertain to facilitating their larger vision, but they're not the responsible party.
Oh yeah, CBS Viacom, they're on the hook forever. I remember as long as that's all I added, Tim. I was just
And
curious.
this is a photo simulation of the top is what's there existing. And the bottom is what the site would look like with the 5 to 20 feet of fill. So it's really just a self-contained, there's nothing to go anywhere really. I mean, we'd have to slope it so it's at like a 1%, so it's not gonna cause erosion. And I mean, one of the things with the plume that you mentioned earlier, right now the water sits in that OTP and causes the contamination that's in the ground to move. This cap would actually get the water off the site and into the river, so it wouldn't get a chance to go into the groundwater and move that plume. So it's part of what the remediation is supposed to do.
Is this line? Is this line?
No, it's not gonna be lined. It's, no, it's just sloped. It's not
And
lined.
capped.
Is it a rumor that the Superfund designation is going away? Did I hear that correctly? Not in this forum tonight, but I've heard a rumor around town that the Superfund designation is about to expire.
No,
Not true.
in the nation or for this project?
For this project, for
No.
this property, for the Viacom spill.
No, so let me just say that. Gilman site, and we remediated the Trestle site a couple years ago. Those have been delisted. But they're still under. There's still a file in EPA. They still have 5-year reviews every 5 years. They're still in the system. They've been delisted, so they're not technically a Superfund site. Because there's no more work left to be done on the sites. But they're still within their purview. And CDPHE and EPA still have jurisdiction over the sites.
So the water that you, because they buried the water that was in the Trestle is now going down.
Yeah, and again, that's all Viacom CBS, and no, they're
That's gonna continue though.
forever, yes. And they're still doing more improvements. They're putting in groundwater wells to extract groundwater out and treat it. They're continually doing actually more stuff there.
So we can get to public comment and stay focused on the ordinance. Are there other questions on the ordinance?
I have a question in respect to the building of the treatment plant, because you said there's no dates on the building of the finishing the reservoir. Well, are there any dates on the treatment plant?
We'd have to build the treatment plant before we can build
Any homes?
anything, so,
But there's no start date or anything?
no.
Amanda?
I think I asked majority of my questions during the question answer. Or when we were going through the actual ordinance. So I'm good as long as we captured the changes that we had discussed.
Do we have anybody on Zoom? Oh, we have Sage.
Yep,
You have anything?
I don't.
And no, we have nobody on Zoom, so we'll open and close public comment.
I would like to ask one
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry, sure.
Do I need to get up there?
Yep. State your
Name
name.
and address.
It's a small form. Carl
public
Parker,
comment.
362 Taylor is not where I live, but that's the property I own. My question is, 5,000, what is the privilege that Tim's group gets that nobody else in Mendrick gets? What's that called again?
An exemption plat.
An exemption plat. How is that different than a PUD?
Well, the zoning for the property is gonna be done by ordinance, so that's what we're considering tonight in part is the zoning component of this. And the subdivision process, which we're not approving anything related to a subdivision. Those will all happen later, it's just that they can happen in slightly smaller chunks than the totality of the property that they own today.
I was just curious because the chunk part sounded like a PUD. Like you have a big chunk of land and you get to be creative.
The zoning will not be changeable parcel by parcel.
Thank you. Close public comment?
Okay.
Anything else?
We look forward to further dialogue or a motion with a recommendation or a recommendation with conditions.
Anything?
I mean, I would make a motion to approve it
With conditions.
with conditions. I think there's some language. Well, there's more than one amendment, is there not?
more than one ordinance?
There's one ordinance that you're considering, and it has code changes to 4 separate sections of the code.
Absolutely. It's one ordinance PDD that has 4 sections.
And, the changes I have, which I think are pretty limited, are to the dimensional use table. That would change the uses for the open space district in the holding zone to being as defined in subsection 70. And to take out a height limitation in the Bolts holding zone. And to change the dimensional limitations for the Bolts open space zone so that it doesn't say 25 NA, rather those 4 blocks would have the language as determined at the time of site plan, comma, site plan review, subdivision, or location and extent review. Location and extent review is likely the provision that the water treatment plant come to the town under.
So what Mike said.
I didn't have any other notations for other codes.
All the other questions.
He said, I second.
My motion is for ordinance TBD with the conditions that Mike just described. And yeah, that's it.
I like the second.
Madam Pryor.
Motion by Jeff, second by Mike. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Amanda, I.
Lynn, I.
Michael, I.
Jeff, I.
Sage, I'm.
Thanks, Sage.
You bet.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Tim.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Middle of summer.
Yeah.
Been waiting a long time for this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'm hungry about it.
You got
Shook Bobby Ginn's hand in my garage. You know, I had a beer with him over.
I like that.
People call it.
What's next?
362 Taylor.
Okay.
So this is a dual review, both conditional use permit and for design review. The plans show a 3.5 level structure for duplex with the max height measured to the midpoint of the roof of 27.833 feet. Parking is fine. They have 4 off-street spaces provided for unit A with 2 in the garage and 2 in front of the garage. And 3 off-street spaces provided for unit B with 1 in the garage and 2 spaces in front of the garage. Duplexes require 3 for unit A and 2 for unit B, so there's an extra space each. The proposed design maintains the structures within required setbacks, allowing for full use of side yard areas for snow shed and drainage. And the site plan and grading details demonstrate that proper grading will be directed away from the house. Staff believes that the design and scale of the proposed structures stepping up a lot with its slope creates visual interest. For the CUP side of things, a duplex is supported by the 2023 community plan and both future zoning contemplations and in the attainable housing and historic character chapter. The duplex will likely have minimal material impact or effect on the distribution of population, transportation, utilities, schools, parks, and recreational facilities. And staff believes that this will not have a negative impact on the character of the area. There are other duplexes or lots that have 2 units on Taylor, such as 532 Taylor, which is a duplex, and 382 Taylor, which was approved a year and a half ago with a single family in the ADU. There are 2 different things that staff has flagged. Public Works stated that the curb stop location needs to be finalized and the service line buried at an appropriate depth. And then the town engineer provided comments specifically in regards to the boundary survey that need to be addressed, but he stated that the updated survey shouldn't show anything detrimental and was okay for review at section. We have two different, we have two suggested conditions. That the applicant shall address the comments provided by the town engineer and that the applicant shall maintain the minimum parking standards for each duplex unit. And all proposed parking spaces, including those in the garage, shall be used as such.
How do you enforce that?
In a way.
Carl goes and makes his garage storage. What do I do? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Maybe that's a better question for Scott.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I did not mean to put you on the spot, but Scott, what's your recommendation?
Scott, are you there? Okay.
Sorry, folks, I just stepped away. What's the question?
So Scott, one of the recommendations from staff is to require that the garage units be maintained for parking as part of a condition for the approval. For 382 Taylor,
Uh-huh.
362 Taylor, and I just didn't know how that's enforced. Since enforcement comes to my office and I happen to be here tonight.
Well, Madison, do you want to talk about how we came up with that or what the thought was
And
behind
there
that?
went the bus.
Yeah,
Michelle, and that to you, and you're sending it back to Madison.
I guess just anecdotally, it's a problem that we deal with often, right? And I agree with you, Michelle. I'm not sure how you necessarily enforce that. I think if there was a condition of approval that was approved, and we came by and, had reports because we operate on a complaint basis, and we got a complaint that they're not using their garage, all their stuff is out in the street because their garage is filled up. I think we could enforce it. If that does not make you comfortable, then we should remove that condition.
Would that be the same with work?
Yeah, I guess I just feel like it's like a condition of what, like, and I hate to bring this up here, and I apologize that I was not a part of the preliminary discussions when this came through. This is the first time I'm taking a look at this, which is entirely my fault and not to the fault of my team. But a condition of this getting approved is that they require, them to use the garage for parking. Well, when this inevitably comes to my office that the garage isn't being used for, and I'm just saying this hypothetically because I get these calls. Not from Carl's property, but in general, these calls come to my office. There's nothing that can be done about it. Like it's not like I can call and say, hey, a condition of the approval of your house, which has already been built and already been approved and it's now already been living in, is that you have to keep your garage open for parking. And it's like, well, and what are you going to do about it? Not let me live here? Like, there's no ramifications. So I guess I would just throw out, what's the value of the condition?
I thoroughly agree with Michelle. I don't see without us having a code enforcement officer and developing an ordinance that requires that of everyone.
Yeah.
If 8 people are living here on each unit, or inevitably whatever will happen. There's nothing, I have found from my office that there's very little I can do to make people use their garages for parking. Unless it's a rental and annual inspection. I'm very sorry, Scott, that I did not look at this ahead of time. I deeply apologize.
Michelle, I'm not sure I caught it either. So
I'm sorry.
Would you like to present any of this? Sure. Please, state name and address.
Hello, okay, this is on, so my name is Carl Kruger. And the address of the property that my wife and I owned since 2004 is 362 Taylor. We bought it right when our kids were 0, and we thought, well, if we're ever gonna have any money hanging around, we should put it somewhere because the kids are gonna eat it. So here we are 20 years later, and I have a kid in college. and Minturn North is happening, and my kid in college is a big strapping kid, and I'd love to put him to work. And the little trailer home that has been kind of carrying the land is just today I went out there and repaired just a random hole in the water line. It's all gray pipe that is not used anymore. So when my wife and I bought this, I kind of knew I would want to either do a duplex or do a house for us, like with a studio in front. Now we have a great place in Eagle Vale. So I've decided that I would like to try to do a duplex, and this design is fitting 2 halves of a duplex. I've done probably 10 or 15 duplexes over my time in the Valley. I was born and raised here, but most of them are in Eagle Vale, a couple in Singletree, Homestead, which, you know, duplexes were the paradigm in Eagle Vale and some of the other areas in Vale. And I kind of like the paradigm, especially since density is being more accepted now. And so essentially what I've tried to do is fit 2 halves of a duplex onto this site. And one of the concessions was that one only gets a 1-car garage and is slightly smaller, but not that much smaller. And that you have to walk up a level to get to the main living space, which I'm normal. Everything I've done in Eagle Vale is upside down house where you don't live on the ground, you live up in the air. A lot of that's because of some of the views are up in the air and hillsides. So part of the problem with being an architect like me, as an architect, is like design is a big circle. And if somebody asked me to explain this design, it's kind of like jumping into the middle of a circle. So like everything is impacting it, but some of the main ideas were focusing the views and the intake of sun toward the lettuce fields and Grouse Creek. And you can see that on the side of the model facing you. And opening up with the windows in the living rooms and the master bedrooms there. On the backside, rather, we're looking up the drainage toward where Lions Head Rock used to be. And when you walk up these stairs on the inside, every time you reach the top of the level, you're looking out a window that looks up that gully. And that happens 3 times. And then you get up to the very top bedrooms, which are not very big. By today's standards, they're less than 12 by 12. But they're intentionally pulled away from the sides of the building so that the sides of the building, which could be as close as 10 feet to the next building, are not McMansionized right up to the limit. So you can see the shoulders. You know, the general idea is that the shoulders here mitigate kind of things being too high. The next building could be as close as this because of the 5-foot setbacks. I did feel like it was important to have lots of parking spaces. I kind of the current hot topic in the Valley, or maybe it's always been a hot topic, especially Minturn, is parking. And I just don't feel like the need for it is going away despite transit. A lot of people move up here to do things not outside the ski area. So I really felt like having 1 extra parking spot for each was worth it. Even though I was unaware that the snow storage had changed since I had been collecting all the documents and making photos, or what do you call it when you print a screen? So it went from 5% of the driveway to 5% of the whole lot, which kind of made my snow storage like 5 times. So I had to hustle and figure out a way that I was going to provide snow storage on the sides. What else? You know, it's really mostly front and back focused. It's trying not to be a bad neighbor to either side. The landscape is mostly just a grass area back here with a fence that runs up the property line. The property line in front does proceed from the party wall straight out. The roof is 312, and the whole roof, I mean, this is where the circular design comes in. In the back of my mind, I've always been fascinated by Gilman. In fact, I did my thesis on Gilman, the revitalization of Gilman in 1990 at Notre Dame. And I've always loved industrial buildings, and my tendency is to be a little bit more spare than other architects around here. And kind of, haunting. But I've always loved the industrial shapes, and since you guys were talking about Belden, that historical reference map or page shows you what I've kind of found is the sloping millworks of a lot of the famous mines, and they're not famous because they're sloping, they're sloped because that's the way the ore comes in up high and it falls down and nobody has to pick it up until it's at the bottom. So that's part of the reason that the roof slopes this way toward the front instead of gabling out this way. Another problem is, if we're being, I'm going to consider doing heat pumps. I haven't done that before. In fact, this will be, I'm very resistant to it because currently the housing that I've been working on is all in-floor heat, no air conditioning, and there's a draft. This will be sitting in the ground 8 feet, 9 feet, drawing cold air all the way up the stairs. And in Minturn, I'm just not sure I'm going to need air conditioning unless things radically change. But, with this the move to electrification, I'm considering a heat pump, and there's a recess in the side of this. You can see in the rendering, it's not in the model, where the heat pump would be located, because I am right 5 feet close to the property line. And I want to be able to get in I want my, either the people I sell to or my tenants to be able to get up that 5 foot line. And so if you put a heat pump out here, it kind of obstructs you getting your soccer net from the backyard to the front net, or your lawn tools and things. So I've worked out a way that if I do in fact go electric and I do have a heat pump, it's recessed in the side here. I've done some preliminary studies, but I haven't hired an engineer. But that would be strange for me because normally in-floor heating is just kind of an amazing set it, let it go, and turn it off in May and turn it back on in October. So I've been working with trying to keep these aisles open, and let's see what else. 312 is a great slope of roof. Even though I show lines on here, it's all asphalt shingle. My brother and I would never do, he's a builder, we would never do anything other than asphalt shingle for the cost, for the fire protection, for it holding snow and not letting it fall on people. And in this aspect, the sun is here at noon and then setting over here. That's part of the reason there are some deeper recesses to protect this house from the setting sun that goes down over Grouse Creek and over Meadow Mountain. But I have no problem guttering this whole thing if I have to. I have done a lot of houses in the same aspect, and I haven't needed gutters, but I've integrated the gutter. I picked my colors based on what's available for gutters and flashing, because a lot of times you pick colors and then all of a sudden you have to go find a flashing that works with that. And that's a waste of time, because you can't just paint flashing because that paint comes off. You got to have a factory finish. I'm all over the place on this design, but essentially I feel like it's reminiscent of what I take away from the mining communities and the railroad communities is kind of a severe industrial look, but not too unfriendly, with the different kind of pop outs and places to view the lettuce fields. What else do you guys? I do have a landscape architect. He's not paid. He's a friend of mine. He did call into question some of my choices because he said he doesn't trust CSU. So he would not put a Newport plum. He would do a crabapple. He doesn't believe the Newport plum will make it. He also doesn't believe buffalo grass will make it. I told him, I'll do rocks here, but essentially my neighbor has grass and my neighbor has grass. And if I line mine with rocks, that's going to be very utilitarian and fine with me. But maybe you guys, or maybe my neighbor is not going to want to see that kind of division that makes the spaces even smaller. When you have 5 feet of rocks and 5 feet of yard, all of a sudden you've got it's 2 strips of not usable land. So I was open to a lot of those things that he mentioned. He kind of didn't want me to do grass, but he said there is a eco-turf that friends of his are experimenting with. I am considering doing AstroTurf back here. Have a line on it. And if Jeff wants it before me, he's just going to have to get a tractor to go to Battle Mountain, where somebody donated a bunch of AstroTurf, and pick it up. It's got thousands of pounds with all the rubber in it, but I did successfully process some for my dad's memorial. And I think it can be done, and it could be a fun thing to try on this house in the back. No, do you have any questions do you want to show just a couple of those real quick? Just start at number 1, And you saw my 11x17s, which is the color of the landscape and the mining precedent. And then also what I believe, essentially my neighbors have stored dirt here in front and they're going to run into the same problem when they develop as I do. You have to pull your building back and you're left with these peninsulas of grade. I've managed to store all the snow here until such time as they develop and it's going to be a lot easier. I just wanted to remember that I have been in this room before presenting as an architect. It's been 10, 15 years. This is the Lovato house on Nelson. Go ahead and go whip through these a little bit. And you can see a little bit, go back one, I'm sorry. You can see a little resemblance between what I'm doing here and what I did go back one for the Lovatos. So that is up near Tom Sullivan on Nelson Road as it curves going up to that private property. This is at least 10, 15 years old. Building stands now, but it's been changed color about 5 times. Go ahead and go next now. But you can see the way I don't necessarily always point the building with the gable end pointing at the view. A lot of times I point it with the eve end. And that's the backside of Mike Lovato's house. And I think several people have owned it since then. And then Cindy Marquez, I did her house, the greenhouse, right next to Mike's house. And you'll see how I generated this images from a cardboard model like this, and I just held it up at the site. And I was simulating what the Molly building was going to do because that was not there yet. Next to Cindy Marquez's house and Mike Lovato's house, and the next. And the model, and next. And I think I did those 2, and then Tom asked me to do one. And that's Tom's, but Tom opted for a timber framed triangular truss instead of a bowstring truss. So that's just, and you could whip through the next couple. I've been in Minter and I've gotten designs approved. Here's where I have no gutters in Eaglevale with a big overhang. And it could be annoying to be dripped on, but there is no gutter. And this has a couple of different aspects. So I have my parents' house in Eagle. And I do work with vernacular forms, but in this case, I'm kind of pointing out, like I said, not out the gable, which is typically more vernacular. Next. This is where I'm showing the existing condition is the top. My little home 362 is a trailer that's on a permanent foundation, and it's got all that retaining wall in front because presumably he leveled the land and didn't want to export it because that wasn't the thing to do in the 80s, especially if you didn't want to spend a lot of money. So he held it there, and he's got a yard on top of it, the person I bought it from. And then if you scroll down a little bit, you see what I'm talking about, these peninsulas of grade going to be left between the houses. And to the left of me and to the right of me, those are older homes. Maybe the one on the right is definitely a trailer. But we're going to end up with these peninsulas of grade that we're both probably going to agree to not spend any money retaining because it's useless. You know, because the setback pushes you into the hill on Taylor. So I'm not saying anything other than that. Should the owner of 372 come in for a building permit while I'm building mine, it may affect if I have any retaining walls there at all on that side. And then you can go to the next one. And in Eaglevale and other areas, you have some room to plow snow and flat. But I do think this will be snow storage via a snow blower because these are not exactly, this is not representative of my engineered kind of site plan, but essentially you're going to be throwing snow up on a slope over a retaining wall that goes from 0 to 3'6" So I just was pointing out that's half the people in Eaglevale use those anyway if they want to do their own snow blowing, and you end up with less damage to everything in the spring. Next. Oh, lighting plan. That's more important. In the back, if I go all the way with solar and with electrification, this model doesn't represent what's happening in the back, but I have reserved on my site plan a space for 2 separate freestanding solar collectors. Originally, when I was thinking of this as a flat roof project, more of a, international style or modern, I immediately called Active Energies and they said, yeah, do you know what happens when you put a solar collector on a flat roof in a residential area? It slopes like this. Because anything like this will get taken off by the wind. So they lay them back like this. So they lay in the snow for 6 months out of the year when you need the electricity. So I abandoned a flat roof, even though I love flat roof forms and have done many. And I go, I'm not even going to bother putting the solar on the roof if I'm going to do this. I still am not sure. Because when it's on the roof, unless it's getting south sun, it's under the snow and it could be buried for a long time. So my strategy is to have 2 separate, potentially 2 separate solar panel arrays in the back. And I have the impervious area left to develop those 2 should I do that. And maybe even put the Tesla batteries up there instead of in my house. Because I'm a little worried when the fire marshal has these presentations and he talks about not being able to put out battery fires. Like they now have wreckers that go into underneath buildings and pull a burning car out because they cannot put an electric car out. They have to let it burn. So if the Tesla battery is in your house, that's one of the, one of the downsides of electrification. If you're really going to go after it, maybe like I'm thinking of it. So it could potentially house an electric or the battery system back there under the collectors. And they're at a steep angle where they're going to get primarily winter sun access and they're going to shed snow. So if you want to, that's only that's a conceptual idea and they're marked out on the site plan that I could do them with the limitation on impervious that I do have. But I understand, as Scott at Madison pointed out, if you do a shed underneath, or if you do those will be a limited use application. And I understand that they're not being approved here. I'm just showing what I'm thinking. Next one. The fence between the 2 buildings in the back. This is an example of what they call a shadow box fence. And I like it, but mine will be stained and mine will have the boards closer spaced on both sides. A little less like a crate or a pallet, and a little more like instead of a 3-inch gap between those 1x6s, it'll be an 1.5-inch gap. But that's an image in case anybody was hung up about what the fence would look like. And you go to the next one, you'll see a sketch of that fence that I did today. Because so if you look at the site plan, you see that the fence dies into the stairway that goes up to where the solar collectors are. And I'm sorry, I haven't rendered this in the model, but essentially the fence straddles that stairway, and those stairways in the landscape align with the ones inside the house. So when you go up the house, you're gonna see up to the top of Lion's Head, and you're gonna see your little stairway to your solar collector in the back to go wipe it off so that it makes energy for you as much as possible. So that's just a kind of saying it's a shadow box, 2-sided fence. Neither side will have, the rails exposed. Both will have cedar on both sides, and it will be painted. You could scroll down and it'll see the bottom of the drawing. So I don't know the next one. I realize that, I just thought of whenever I go to a design review, I have no idea if people are going to, if I think I'm going to be approved, I usually am not. And if I think I'm not going to be approved, I am, but I can't prepare for them because I have no idea what your reaction is going to be. This is a little bit about outdoor lighting, but it's very small. Essentially, the lighting will be can lights in the soffits here and here and there and underneath here. The only surface mounted light will be down here, which you'll see on the elevations if we ever showed them. They would be wall mount, dark sky. I don't have a fixture for you, but I said wall mount, dark sky. And then there'll be step lights inside these stairs going up. Inside they're outside stairs, but lighting your way up into those entryways. So it's it's all dark sky, and a lot of it's even better than dark sky in a way. Recessed cans, can be pretty, and they're on dimmers. I think everything's going to be dimmered now, the new electric code, which I think is great because a lot of times you don't really want to be blasted in your back patio. You kind of want it to be kind of nice and dim, so you should have that option, and we should spend the money in a way to do that. So I don't know if there's anything else on that list. I did have photos of the neighborhood in case you wanted me to bring Taylor Avenue into here to compare what the houses look like, other than to say that there's a lot of different things out there, and mine is also different in a way. I don't know. I would be glad to bring those up so anybody can compare what is built up there now versus what I'm proposing.
Thanks.
Certainly. Well, thanks, Carl. That was really comprehensive. I really like it. I love the mine inspiration. I too share a love of that kind of style. Even though I think in years past, there was previous commissions that sat up here, and I think I presented something once, and it was denied for being called mine shaft architecture. That was the first time I'd ever heard that style. But I do like it, and I really can see where the inspiration comes from. I think it's really cool. And I love all the thought that went into it. I think it's going to fit in just fine with the neighborhood. I think you've thought of pretty much everything. I don't really have any specific questions, related to any issues that I'm concerned about. I think just in relation to the comments that were made earlier about the parking, I think just whether it's a duplex or a single family house or whatever it is, obviously parking in town has been under scrutiny for many years. And I've said it before that I think that our best code enforcers in town are our neighbors. And I think just having respect for your neighbor and in the whole community in general just kind of goes to that's how ideally I think it should be. And I think that I know it's not always that way. I lived in a triplex actually that was very similar to this in Westville, similar style, and had a tandem single car garage that you could barely get a Volkswagen into because it was so skinny. But we could get one car into it, and we had to hang the bikes from the ceiling. But I think just we have the problem on Main Street, and we've been approving plans for the last 5 years or so that where that lot has been maxed, and the parking has been shown to work on paper. And we've had many situations where, for whatever reason, they're not parking in the garage, they're not parking in the driveway, they're parking on Main Street. And I think Taylor Street is a perfect example now, and who knows what it'll be like post Minter North, but parking and snow removal and everything. Obviously, if you guys end up living here, or if you end up renting it, however where it shakes out, it's just got to be where the neighbors are policing each other. And if all the cars that are supposed to be in the driveway and the garage are on the street, it doesn't work for anybody. So I don't particularly think that it should be a condition of approval because it's unenforceable. So I think it's a moot point of, I don't believe it should even be a condition. I think it just has to be said that if we're going to show it on paper, then use it. Right. I think it's great.
Carl, how are you? Good. I like your design. I don't have an issue with the design, a lot of things that I focus on mainly is, do you have parking? do you have your snow storage? Does your roof have snow cliffs? And gutters are a good idea. You know, I see, you know, I mean, you're definitely, you know, the two compact spots in the front, you know, one on the one side and one on the other. You're definitely tight in there, you know, and one, you know, you're tight in there, you know, that's, but if, you know, if compact spots or spots that, you know, we allow and it works out on math. You know, that's that. You know, my thing is your 355 square foot of snow storage. It's definitely in question as to where that is. Cause that's a lot of, you know, I mean. I see that you have some of it shown, but. You know, you don't really have, it doesn't add up to 355 feet, so.
Hopefully, if they reviewed the calculations, they would, the planning staff would say that it does.
Well, I see 24 square feet listed here. On the plans.
That's for unit B in addition to the part that's on there, yep, that's the
On
other.
the side, and the side is roughly 4 foot by. So that's say it's 4 foot by 20, so that's 80 square feet. Plus 24, that's 104 square feet on that side. And then the other side. I saw it somewhere.
354 or 84, what was the?
355, I think. I don't know. Scott, can you tell me where the?
That's right there, no storage area. 20, is that correct?
189 for unit A and 1.
Oh, yeah, okay, so yeah, the totals are. So this snow storage is proportional to that whole lot, which is what the future subdivision will be. Before you guys changed the code just a year ago, it was 5% of the pavement, now it's 5% of the whole lot. So this essentially went up 5 times.
No,
I had to go from 48 feet to 100 and.
actually, so just so you know, the old code was always 5% of the lot. Somehow it
Oh,
got,
really?
yeah, somehow it got tweaked at a certain point. And we just put it back where it was, you know, but
It did seem low, I never showed it as low as you. guys have.
5% of the parking spot.
No, it's 20
ridiculous.
minimum for Eagleville and the county. 20%
So-
for the parking lot. And they have requirements to say it has to be 6 foot minimum depth.
I mean, you're close, you know, what I see about, you know, 320-ish.
And just so you know, the code says I am required to have 3 on the big side and 2 parking spaces on the smaller side. And the code says, it doesn't specify commercial or residential, it says anytime you have a parking requirement, 30% can be met by compact cars. Well, that doesn't touch any of my required, so all I did was say, I want an extra parking space each, and I'm allowed to because they're not required, I can make them compact. And I personally drive a Ford Ranger, which is 6 feet wide, not a Ford 350. And I know people, the garage doors shown are 8 and 16 feet, they're standard. Today, now they're small for like a guy who has a F-350, in fact, you don't even you don't put those in the garage. So these are pretty much standard across the board in the county. That's where I got the compact car space because your code didn't have it. And I just went to the next jurisdiction up. So that's how I made the snow storage work, because like I mentioned, I had done a screenshot of the snow storage all the year I've been trying to design on the side of doing my regular business. And then the code changed, and I'm like, and Madison and Scott had to point out to me, well, you've got a serious problem with snow storage. And I thought, oh, so one of the ways I did it was to play games with the parking, but I felt like it's a legitimate game. I mean, and I'm the first one to go through apparently with this rule going back to where you say, 5% of the whole entire lot.
I think we've applied it since then, but
And I would just point out the whole entire lot, I am like I parked my building so close to the pavement that you're not gonna find. Even if I pulled the building through the grade and made it deeper and deeper, I still wouldn't have any more snow storage. So in a way, I feel like I would, as an architect, think that it's better to do it per your paving and your exterior stairs. So I would like say, like what the county says, 20% of your exterior paving has to have snow storage.
got a lot of snow in winter.
I know, and I'm just saying and make it 6 foot minimum, but so I'm just throwing that out
I
there.
can tell you 5%, you know, if it snows a lot, you gotta move it because you're not gonna need more than that, you know, yeah, and, so like I said, snow storage, you're close on the math. I understand what you did, cutting it down to a compact spot to meet the snow requirements.
Or to meet the driveway width and still have some space for snow storage.
If that's permitted and you have the snow storage required, I'm okay with it. Looks good, but you should put snow clips and gutters on the roof.
I've never, well, have you ever done 312 in asphalt? Shingle?
Yeah,
Have you ever seen a slide? Never.
but, well, if it was on the backside, it would
Asphalt
slide.
shingle?
Yeah, because when if it drifts over, Amanda has a 312
I definitely do.
pitch
And
in her
I
house.
I'm sorry, I don't know, Jeff, do you want to weigh in? Have you ever seen an asphalt shingle at 312, which is the lowest slope you could do?
I think mine is pretty close, right?
Yeah.
Did yours slide?
It does not slide, but I definitely have.
It doesn't actually slide, Carl. What happens is when the snow drifts over and you got to drift over in a certain area because you can't control the wind.
Well, the clip's not gonna help you with the drift.
Your gutters and clips will help. But what I'm saying as far as sliding goes, is what happens is if it builds up in that last chunk of ice
Sure.
at the end of the
Cornice.
season. In April, when it's hot out, that little block plunks down. It just happens.
Okay.
But on the front side,
I'm sorry.
but I'm good with that.
I have, no questions, fine, we're very similar to Mike's just about snow storage. Not doing the calculations like Mike did, but maybe just revisit, make sure that you feel comfortable with that. I trust the staff, that they've gone through that, but it does look really tight to me based on that.
If you saw the duplex, a tight one. Sort of modern duplex done by Stuart Brummett, white house, no eaves. Duplex on Taylor. Like a 10-foot driveway going 75 feet back. I mean, I don't know where they're putting their snow, but it's clear. And I mean, I'm sure they don't have 5% of their driveway even in storage.
That's
But
what
anyway,
we're trying to get away from.
I know. Hey, look, all these parking spaces are on my property.
I
They're
don't,
not on
I
Taylor.
don't have,
They're-
I don't have any problem with the parking spaces. Like Amanda was saying, if staff's verified that you have the snow storage required, looks good.
Anything else? That's it.
I do.
You're up there, go for it.
So,
Oh, yeah. How much, Carl, is on each side? 5 feet, you said, on each side? Between
Yeah.
like the property line?
Yes, 5 feet from the property line, well, actually 5'6" or 5'4.5". I've left myself a tiny bit of slop. So yeah, but that's the setback for that part of Minturn.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have stuffed a big, huge duplex onto a small property, but what Active Energy said to you that the solar probably wouldn't work on the roof because it wouldn't slant properly?
No, what I said was, I've looked at solar on flat roofs. Because I initially thought flat roofs would be the best place for a solar because you don't have to face your roof toward the sun. You have a flat plane to work with. But the problem with it is the only economical way to put solar on a flat roof and not have it blow off in a windstorm is to lay it down so that it's like maybe 15, maybe 10 degrees off of the slope of the flat roof. So my flat roof in my current house in Eagleville has about 3.5 feet of snow on it, and it will till about May.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about
Yeah,
that. I'm
so
talking about-
that's what I was saying. The solar collectors on a flat roof, they pretty much said they're willing to put them up there, and I can't figure out why. I think there's a lot of scams going on in solar because they're buried in snow, and that's when we need to produce electricity. But also, I didn't want to try and face my roofs to put solar on the roofs. One, because if the snow doesn't slide off your panel, it's useless to you. And so I'm putting them on the ground where I can get to them and knock them off with air. I've been told you're not even supposed to brush a solar panel off with a broom. You need an air system. So there's a bunch of glitches. People are in the cell mode right now of electrification. And then in about 5 years from now, we're going to see what happens with this cell mode. So I've been just saying, I'm not going to change my building's shape because it's a duplex to have a south-facing roof, because that would mean only one half of the duplex has solar panels on it, because if I do a pitched roof this way. So it's kind of what I'm just trying to say is that I didn't really want bad solar panels to drive the shape of my building. I put them in the back with covering a shed if I go for that limited use later.
Covering a shed in the back?
Yeah, covering a shed, like, you can do a shed of a certain number of square feet on the property, and it can be within 5 feet of the property line. It's just all per your code. So if you look at the site plan, do you see this solar?
Yep, I saw it.
Okay, I'm asking Lynn because she's got a set of drawings right in front of her. So all I'm saying is I've provided for future solar in that I haven't taken up any more impervious materials than I need to in order to do those solar collectors, if I can make this work.
I mean, it'd be cool, but it's kind of an eyesore. But I mean, if I was
Well,
your
I
neighbor,
don't know what you're going to be able to say about eyesores on solar. There's state laws that talk about that. And yes, we all ruffle our feathers. I'm on POA in Eagleville, and I'm not
okay,
on
okay, easy,
saying
easy,
it's like,
no problem.
Anything else, Sage?
No,
Okay. I'd rather have solar panels than windmills, quite frankly. And it's not because of the eyesore building noise. Huh?
You hate that?
You don't like Dutch people?
I don't like the noise, but that has nothing to do with it. I believe in your submittal, it said people were talking about possibly taking these trees out, or did you just say they were trimming them back?
I say I'm trimming them back. I had my surveyor locate them as accurately as he could. And they're on the neighbor's property predominantly. Only one encroaches with its south face on my property. They're gonna have to go. They're not good trees. They're like willow, which is just about, I mean, every landscape architect will tell you, get rid of a cottonwood, don't even think twice about it. So I'm not concerned about keeping those there because that was then and this is now, but I'm not gonna pull them out because they're on his property and it'll be up to
So you're
him.
just gonna trim them.
Right, as far as I know, the law is that I can trim them to be not on my property. And this, like, I don't know if you guys handle this, but or if your code people handle this, who's responsible for a tree that drops fruit on your property?
Discuss that with.
Yeah. So I just didn't want to necessarily bring him into the discussion before I knew what I wanted to do with my land and have the best chance to do what I can do. Yeah. I may take them down for him so that I can, although the root balls are gonna make a great way to hold up the land while I cut out right from underneath it.
And then
If they
it
go-
looks
if they're
like the
root-
rest of the landscaping towards the back.
Yeah. I mean, I'm open to gravel all along the sides. I just, I want to be able to get from the front to the back of the property without walking over things that are ornamental, because they will be destroyed. I really feel like the front to back with a 5-foot setback, you're gonna want to either get a tractor back there, because somebody's gonna want something different. And you can fit a 5, I think, the mini excavator just about barely 5 feet. So I planned turf grass there. I would do rocks, but I kind of thought, well, maybe you guys would say, isn't rocks a little severe compared to your neighbors on both sides who have turf grass? So I was saying turf grass because I have also, maybe there's a way to drip irrigate a 5 foot swath of turf grass. I've been wondering about it. Do you really need a pop-up? Couldn't you do just snaking? Yeah, below grade, so none of it evaporates. So, and I'm gonna tell you, like, I've been told that if you starve bluegrass too much, then you will lose the bluegrass and weeds will come up, and then you have to treat them with chemicals. But the great thing about bluegrass is you can starve it and you can let it go dormant, and you don't have to water it to make it green, and it covers and it spreads. It's not a rhizome. So there are some benefits to bluegrass, and we're going to go through this too. Everybody's going to tear everything out, and then we're going to realize, well, we have a bunch of heat islands around of our properties, and it's way hotter than it used to be. Now we're cooling it with water, essentially by watering.
Years ago, I took a turf grass class from Ben Kruger.
Oh,
I was the only female in the class and I was the only A.
oh, good for you.
Proud of that. But he always spoke that with grass, the longer you keep the top of it, the deeper the roots grow, and that's better for your grass. The problem is people with bluegrass have a tendency to want to shave it. You know, you can let regular turf grass grow, just let it grow a little longer, your roots go deeper, and you won't need to water it so much. Anyhow, I think it's a good project. I like the look of it. I pushed him, even though you're meeting the code, you're gonna probably have some issue with snow. But it doesn't like, if you're gonna try to keep the sides open, it's all gonna come from the front of the house, basically.
The only snow that's, is gonna be from the parking lot. If you look at the decks, your right-hand deck will be able to throw into where I've not called snow storage at all, because
You're not gonna have trees.
no. The only trees I really have are in back. I have one aspen in front on the left-hand side.
So the front driveway is what, 8 or 10 feet long? To get to the garage?
From Taylor to my property.
No, in front, right here, 20.
20 feet, 20 yards.
Right, so here is the edge of Taylor, just so we start from pavement, and this is all no man's land, right? This is all where people park currently. All my cars are on my property. So from here to the face of this garage is 22 feet.
On your property.
I'm just wondering how much space this is low up here. Because if you have a good snow blower, you can even blow it back.
Right, but I've only shown that as a diagonal. That's where I try to point out that this is showing that a snow blower is going to do this, and it's going to be me. But
The question being with your parking suggestion, and I don't know how you do this, but my lease requires them to park not to use the garage for storage. In other words, the town, instead of trying to control it, sometimes the landlord.
agreed.
Control. And perhaps you think doing that somehow.
I
because
would.
If you're going to be renting these, you're always going to have trouble with that.
And I'm not against, I feel like either here or there, because I don't know how somebody would enforce that legally. You know, I mean, maybe wait till somebody opens their garage, but so I think it is kind of frivolous, and I feel like I'm meeting. I think you're gonna get more complaints about the amount of snow storage you're gonna require, and you're gonna push back, because that's the way you feel, but for me, it was 5 times the amount of the previous code.
What it was, the previous code was 30 years, and that was the code, and it's questionable whether the code got changed or just got shuffled and a little bit confused.
But I'm the first one, as far as I know, I'm the first one going through.
No,
No.
there's 1 or 2 of us.
Oh, well, that makes more sense, actually.
Right over
The
here
first
on
one
the
this year, but there's been a whole 6
Right
months.
across the street, Carl. Right across the street.
You can always look at my house anytime you want to see something. The one thing I have in my yard. It's full. Thank you.
Yep.
So, do we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. So we're gonna open public comment, of which there's nobody here. Is there anybody answering? Close public comment. Now. Amanda, go for it.
Okay. Now you can have me sideways,
I think there are two conditions.
but one of the conditions, I think we should change.
Well, say that.
I'd like to, into one condition, to remove parking in the garage requirement. Please. Otherwise, I make a motion to approve the.
Second.
Motion by Amanda, second by Jeff. Any further discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
And I.
Lynn, aye.
Michael, I.
Jeff, aye.
Sage aye. Sage aye.
Carol, thank you for such a good application.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you. When people go through the code and understand it and make up.
Not easy to write a code. I don't envy you guys in your position because, you make a new code, you make new errors, but you fix some old ones, but it's impossible to write,
Thanks for giving us such. good-
Well, I mean, it's, anybody who's done what you guys do, know. Or if you've done on both sides, like if you read the code for your project, you see things from a totally different way than you do from trying to make codes that protect each other's neighbors. But I've been doing it with the county, the land use regs. I've just finally have read every single word 100 times in the whole document, and now they're gonna change it. So I've got to relearn the count, whenever that happens.
Don't forget to give your wife a Valentine.
Well, architects that build what they draw are better architects than those that don't.
I hope that that's true.
That's my experience.
They're a little less flamboyant.
Yeah. Yeah. They draw and they go, how you gonna build that? They go, I don't know, you fix it. Let's go on paper.
Hey, we're gonna build stuff. It works.
Right.
Next, discussion direction items, moving forward, I assume that's Scott.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, you guys need another quick break or you want to roll into this?
Go.
Get her going? Okay,
And sorry you weren't here to get your candy for your
Still got
birthday.
2 seasons.
well, happy Valentine's Day anyway.
Thank you.
I don't need any more candy, but thank you. So I will kind of breeze through this and we can get to talking about the survey and the open house stuff, but there's a memo that I provided that kind of for your and the public's benefit outlines where we've been since fall, what we accomplished in January and what the direction is moving forward. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe based on your discussions, the last one I missed with regard to, form-based versus hybrid versus traditional code. Our direction as staff is to create a hybrid leaning traditional code. So basically keeping our existing format. I think we heard loud and clear, and we all agreed that at the very least, we should be creating better graphics, illustrations, statements of intent and purpose. So people that read this code are reading, language that they can understand, graphics that they can understand, and the intent and purpose of certain regulations and the zone districts and all that stuff is easily understood, right?
Scott, can I
Yeah.
break in a minute? At the
Sure.
last meeting, I voted for all traditional. And my question would be for you tonight. Is there any reason we can't stick with all traditional and accommodate or some of the thoughts that were expressed or conversations by amending the current traditional code and keeping it traditional?
I'd like to comment on
I
that
thought
as
we
well.
didn't have traditional today. I thought it was a hybrid today. It just means
No.
traditional.
No, we have a traditional today.
I like.
The code currently is traditional.
I like.
Hold on, Michael.
Let me-
Let's-
let me-
let's
Yeah,
answer.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, I'm gonna blow your mind, but I think your existing code is a mishmash of traditional with some hybrid and it's got graphics and I don't want to get so hung up on the terms traditional or hybrid or form-based. I think we understand what a form-based code is and that it probably is not the right tool for the town, right? We have elements of form-based code already baked into Appendix B for the 100 block. We have some elements of kind of a hybrid code already in Chapter 16. Whatever we call it, I think we're gonna take our code. If you wanna, yeah, and Lynn, I'd like to understand what your desire or concern is, of trying to keep it traditional. If that means more text and less graphics, let's talk about that. But
when we started this, I was under the understanding that what we were going to do was correct and amend some of the issues we were having with the code. And then we started working on it, and we did a lot of work to it. And I thought when we come back, we were gonna go back to working that. It seems like a much simpler project than this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
well, you are correct. We've done a lot of work looking at kind of nuts and bolts stuff, line item uses in a use table, dimensional standards that would apply to different zone districts. I don't think a lot of that work is going to change dramatically. But we're contemplating, and what I am recommending to you and to town council is that we take that work, we add to it, we change it, whatever. But the code itself, the way it's organized, the way it's written, and the graphics and illustrations that go along with it that help illustrate and explain what it is we want versus what we're trying to avoid, that's what we can do better at. Most codes these days have some elements of kind of a hybrid where you have, a traditional code in my mind is something that is mostly text, very few illustrations, and you're bouncing from one section to the next, trying to figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish. A hybrid code gets it closer to something that marries the best parts of a form-based code and a traditional text-based code to make it more understandable. So I still recommend that should be our goal, is to clean up technical things and language that are confusing or contradictory. We know kind of where those are and what we need to do to fix those. We've already spent a ton of time updating our definition section, which I'll bring back to the Planning Commission, maybe at the next meeting, all these things that we've previously worked on. I want to bring those back, and so you guys can recall and remember what it is that we did. But things like definitions, the table of uses, those are pretty easy to, comparatively to correct. We've already done that. Now I think the job is to, make this a more understandable code, make it easier to navigate. And again, based on your discussions, our discussions over the last 3 months, do whatever we can to make this thing more understandable through graphics and stuff like that. So does that?
I guess
address
what I
your
don't
concern?
understand is why can't you do that just by amending the code we have? By adding more pictures, by adding more graphics? Does
I
that?
think that's what I'm saying we're gonna do.
I know, but why does the form base come in there? Why can't it? Never mind.
I'd like to say something.
The form-based, in my mind, is these images that, look to the community plan, the 2023 community plan, and the work that SE Group did and Cheney Bostic did to integrate into that plan some illustrations to explain what was intended for some recommended future land use zone districts. The mixed use, we had several graphics that kind of tried to illustrate what could be done within a mixed use zone district and where buildings would be placed. They're kind of three-dimensional. That's about as form-based as I think we need to get, is to illustrate through those kind of graphics how to measure a setback, how to measure building height, what's most important in locating a building on a lot. Those types of things are really helpful in graphic form when it's married with the text and the explanation of here's what we're trying to create, or here's what within this zone district is really important, existing conditions, the existing built environment, and here's why we want to mimic that or mirror that moving forward. So again, I don't know if we should get too hung up on.
Well, Michael has a question for you too, so let's go through yours and then we'll go on.
Okay.
I'd like to sort of jump in on that, Scott, a little bit. It is something that we've been discussing for quite a while. And, you know, I think that, you know, I think that a lot of us agreed that, you know, traditional, and then, you know, something said peppered, and, you know, and then what Lynn just said, there's no reason that we can't make changes to the traditional code we have. We just pretty much approved a separate code for Bolts Lake. We have a separate area zone for the 100 block. And as far as Amanda, you know, that last meeting, you know, has a good point as far as, you know, trying to get things moving forward. And we've been stuck in 3 meetings. Wait, I'll back up a little bit. You know, Jeff has commented in the past that, you know, let's work on what we can work on. You know, and get things going. And I think that, you know, we're not really like any other town. We don't have a lot of space left. We're limited on space that we have left. We don't have any, you know, what we have coming forward, we're pretty well aware of. And I just, you know, I think that we spend, you know, I think that we need to give diagrams for people to, as to, I don't think we need to make it harder and more difficult or time consuming or, you know, additional costs to the town. I think I would like to sort of vote amongst this right now as to whether if we go traditional and make changes to what we got and we keep moving, or if we keep having meetings on what base. I think that I would like to make a motion to stick with traditional and keep this process moving forward.
I've always said it's speech delivery.
I agree with you, Scott. I don't want, I think we've been getting hung up on terminology. And I think that we've been very clear to just describe that we have a hybrid code now. To again, put a name on it. But what we want is, we want to have a code that is easier to use, easier to understand the intentions, and easier to navigate, and easier for the end user to just get from point A to point B clearly. And I think that I'm not going to call it anything. Let's just say that it's going to have words and it's going to have pictures, period.
Yeah, and
And
none
I
of
think
this.
once we decide, and once we dig into the first zone and we start applying that to the first zone, when we revisit every zone in town, like we just did for Bolts Lake, we're going to go, okay, this needs a picture, this needs a picture, this doesn't need a picture. And then we're going to go, okay, next zone, well, let's do this. It's very similar to what we just did in the last zone. And then once we get rolling, it's going to be easy.
Yeah, and thank you, Jeff. You know, a couple things. Michael, you guys asked me and Matt to bring back information about form-based code. That's why we did it.
Matt did a great job. Matt did a great job of explaining that to us, Scott. And when Matt was talking with us and you weren't here, I think that we were just still trying to move forward with you know, working with what we have and making some changes, regardless of, you know, I thought what we currently have is a traditional code. I thought that, you know, as far as not putting more on people, you know, if you comply with your snow storage, your setbacks, your parking and this and that, bring in a design, you know, I don't know, you know, I think it would move forward faster. But, and if we have to call it something. You know, I understand what Jeff's saying for sure. That yes, we have a different code than 100 block. That took years to sort out. You know,
Maybe I can add some clarity. You know, when I think of, and I truly am a little baffled by this because I thought we were here to talk about the survey and the open house format and be done with our evening and get feedback on that.
I'm sorry.
I thought we had, as staff, received direction to move forward on basically a traditional code that is spruced up and had better graphics. Okay. So if you want to keep talking about this, we can, but what I envision is that we are going to use a lot of the work that we've already done for the use table definition section. We're going to start working on process sections of the code, probably the sign code, make sure that complies with the most recent court cases and state statutes. You know, we're trying to move forward. We took a break to talk about form-based code because we were given direction to educate ourselves on what that is, whether or not we were interested in it. We made a decision. We're moving forward. The only things that I think will be embellished or bolstered in our code really have to do with the dimensional limitations, the illustrations that go along with those, and the site-specific standards section. We're probably going to have a separate section of the code in the future that does a much better job of all the explaining of different setbacks, explaining of how to build a berm with a fence on it, things like that. Things that traditionally I and Madison and anyone that sat before us have struggled to enforce and interpret because they're written poorly, there's no graphics, or the graphics we have are absolute crap. So that's all I envision as far as adding better graphics. And again, these are conversations that we've already had. I'm not talking about adding layers of new regulations that make things harder for people. I'm talking about making the code easier to interpret.
I thought we were gonna move forward, Scott, with certain aspects of it, you know, I thought we were gonna move forward. You know, with discuss amongst the commission as to, you know, what changes we thought we might want and have sort of like a blueprint of that, and then have the, you know, the public from certain neighborhoods come in and discuss what changes we were thinking. And now it looks like we're, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it seems like we're backing the process up and starting and I mean, if we're not gonna finish this code for 2 years, I don't have an issue. That's fine with me. But you know, I know there was concern as to, you know, trying to get something done. And if we're gonna bring, you know, for example, we'll use Eagle Street. If Eagle Street's coming in regards to changes that are potentially being made, it's better to bring Eagle Street in with what changes we think want to be made than to have them come in 2 or 3 times. I don't know, Amanda, you want to come in 3 times?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was what was communicated last time.
That's what I thought.
Was that I wanted to bring the community in and we had something to show them
Yeah.
versus just
Starting over.
Starting over and asking them.
I agree.
Okay. Scott, I think part of this might have been flustered or cleaned out if you had been here last time. I'm sorry, because it started at the last meeting and unfortunately that's where it went. I don't know where we're going with it. I think that the idea is that maybe we quit talking about all these different types of codes and let's get to work.
Well,
And I
maybe
know
we
that's
don't
what
have
you're
any.
trying to do. I know that's what you're trying to do. I know we need better graphics. I know that things like that. So I
Well-
apologize, but I need it to be fleshed out one more time tonight.
But then we have the survey that we are, so now we get to talk
Well,
about.
Now we're,
Well, let's go talk about the next.
Well, so real quickly, again, the survey and the open houses, this I thought goes back to conversations and direction that we've had was to, before we start implementing and recommending changes, reach out to the community and understand what they think, particularly in their neighborhoods, but if they wanted to comment on some other area of town, what is it that they feel really makes that area unique? Or what are the characteristics before we throw the baby out with the bathwater? That was the direction we were given. That's why we're proposing a survey, and that's why we're proposing open houses. Before we get to proposing any changes, if we misunderstood that, I apologize, but I'm not trying to drag this out, but Michael posed some questions in an email, much like he is tonight, and my response was, one of the reasons why he wanted to make sure that we had good public process in this and that we reached out to the community and got input was because I felt we did a bad job of that during the community plan update. I don't think that effort from a public engagement process was all that great. We wound up with some great recommendations in that plan, particular to updating the zoning code and looking at creating more streamlined zoning, getting rid of character areas, all those things that have kind of been a goal for several years. But again, I go back to meetings that we've had where you guys said the public has to be involved. We have to be transparent. And the last meeting we talked about, what happens with new zone districts and stuff. I thought it was pretty clear that we were going to reach back out and take the temperature of people and get some feedback from folks on what they feel, what characteristics within these neighborhoods are really defining. So we can then use that to start crafting new zone districts.
Scott, and I'm going to say this, and please take it with a grain of salt or whatever you think, because I know a couple of people here, I know Amanda feels it. I don't think this questionnaire is going to give us a great response from the residents of this town, because I don't feel that some of these questions are something they can easily answer. I think question number 3 is great. But it needs to be simple, like we said at the very beginning of this with definitions, that the average person can just easily say, this is what I like about my neighborhood, this is what I don't like about my neighborhood. But when it says thinking about the future, what physical changes will enhance the character of this area, you're not going to get good response on that from the people of this town. That question is not that they're dumb or anything, but they don't get that involved. It needs to be some simpler questions, if possible. Like I said, I think number 3 is good. I think the referencing the area you're in. I asked Madison about you live outside. I understand it's because of second homeowners. But I can tell you tenants aren't going to sit there and fill this out. You're just not going to get a good response from it. I really don't feel that way. So I have to be honest with you. And then the second thing is on the map. I think it needs to be a little better defined, because when you're looking at it, you show Toledo Street. It doesn't honestly say Main Street. It says Boulder Street. It doesn't say Pine Street. It doesn't show where Malloy Park's drive off is. People need to be able to look at it and reference it easier and place it. I assume, I didn't even know we had Ballpark Road. So, I know it's a great try, but if we're going to take it to the public and we're going to take it to this homeowners, they need to comprehend it a little better. I can't even read what some of these things at the bottom say because of the way, probably because of the print, but where is, or if you've got areas, they know it by Baldock subdivision, they know it by downtown, they know it by Southtown, they know it by Malloy Park. Areas, they're going to sit there and they're going to say, oh, I'm not going to do this. This is too much work. And I've had people tell me that about the HPC application, which needs to be defined. I know that because I tried to keep it on top of it. But somebody came to me one day and said, I want to fill it out. And I said, I want it, why isn't it being done? And I said, well, you need to fill out the application. Oh, I looked at it online, it takes too long. That's the kind of response you get. So the simpler we make these questions, Simple, like, do you like where you live? Yes, what do you like about it? Let them do that. What kind of changes do you see maybe happening there? But don't get into, this is written from somebody who really knows what they're talking about. You know, the average person doesn't. And I don't know how else to explain it.
All the Eagle Street pretty much, I think that the majority of us pretty much like things the way that we have it, and
He still needs to hear that from the people.
absolutely, hearing that from the people is fine, you know, but as well as we're all here for a reason. And
Now, I don't see Little Beach on here. Little Beach is a possibility of proper development.
we can do it for the next 3 years.
Is it not?
It's fine.
I
What
mean,
was the question, Lynn?
isn't, Little Beach isn't itemized, isn't shown on here by name. That's a possible development area. That should be on here. To the point where people see it that way, because that's in the code, gonna be in the code. I mean, that's why I asked when we talked about what was going on, Matt suggested doing a questionnaire, and we said, yes, that would be great. And I said, can we possibly see the questions before them going out to the public? Because I think that's important for us to have some insight on that. Because we know what our neighbors will and won't do, or what they might comprehend. And you guys are great. You do a great job at what you do, but you come from it with a different word set than what some of the people in the public understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's gotta, you know, just because I always use Eagle Street as an example. We're us and potentially some people on the 400 block on Main Street, you know. Technically, everybody's getting up zoned and we're getting down zoned. There it is.
No, don't say.
No one's getting up zoned and no
Not
one's
to-
getting down zoned. We
We
haven't gotten there
that
yet.
point. We haven't gotten to
We're
that
stopping
point.
by from going there. We're
Yeah.
talking about these questions.
We haven't got to that, but I don't know, it would be nice to talk about that amongst the commission. And try to at least.
We'll get to that when we get to the chapter
Figure
and
something out.
section of the code. Right now, let's try to figure out what we can do to get the public to give us some help. I like the idea of having them come to the rooms or coming here into this hall, like you said, 2 or 3 different ones, depending on the section of town. I think that's great.
But that's what I had a question on, because it says 3 open houses starting March 11th. Are you going to break it down by the zones? I'm asking, sorry, I should have just asked, sorry. Those 3 open houses, how are they gonna be structured, and are they going to be during, because we said this a number of times, we wanted it during our meeting, so that we could have that dialogue back and forth?
Or we come into. the
Or we
house.
come in, but like, how are those gonna be structured?
So those are going to be not on regular meeting days. Those will be independent of regular meeting days, and they're structured so the areas are kind of grouped together geographically as much as possible.
So it'd be like the 200 block through the 600 block, the 600 block through the 1200 block, something like that.
Well, yeah, we tried to look at this from the standpoint of distinct areas or neighborhoods, not necessarily based on blocks. Eagle Street is a great example. We were labeling that area G. Those are all riverfront lots. They have a very unique lot layout and configuration, and they have a street that is somewhat like other streets. But so that's kind of how we tried to lay this out. I hear what you're saying. That might not be how people perceive themselves or where they live.
They're
You know,
looking
so-
at it as their neighborhood.
We like our mixed use.
It's like Pine Street and Boulder are neighborhoods.
Which is why we did area A and F,
Yeah.
Pine Street, Boulder, area H, Ella and J, was it?
Kind of hard because
Yeah,
some of the legend colors don't exactly match what's on the map either.
it might be a printing thing, but that's why we tried to break it down, just logically kind of where
Mine
people
looks
live.
black and this looks gray, so kind of And it could just be the way the computer prints out the
The
colors.
zoning maps don't even match yet. My house is on, the health. department's
So,
on, one deal.
You know, I know you have this scheduled to go out on the 16th. But I don't think you're gonna get it from the average daily resident back. You might get it from the people in this town who are developers, or the people in this town who are architects, or something like that. But I don't think the average person's gonna take the time to fill this much out. And I don't know that they're gonna comprehend what you're trying to say.
Well,
I don't know how, that's, and when they come in
we
this
can
room, we
certainly
have,
rewrite, we can
a few of
rewrite
the
those two
questions.
questions.
yeah,
I don't think those are using, too big a language, but I hear what you're saying. And if we get a poor response, we get a poor response. I'm not doing this just to do it. I hope we do get a good response. But every town, everywhere has trouble with surveys and the public process, but we have to try. We have to put this out. We have to hold open houses to not just check a box and say we did it. I am hopeful that we will get people that are interested in this and that appreciate the fact that we're reaching out to them before we go down a road of potentially changing the zoning that applies to their property. We're taking the time to understand what they think is important in their neighborhoods. So you may be right. You might not get a great response. Most of these things don't. But I still think it's important to do it.
God, one more thing, and I'm just trying to be thorough and just to move forward and stuff, like you wanna move forward, I understand that, I definitely. Will, being the last house on Eagle Street with my zoning and the zoning in front of my neighbors. And I know that there's zoning that's not marked properly still on the maps, I think before we have public and discuss zoning, we wanna make sure that our maps actively reflect the zoning that's there, whether it's in the 400 block, the 1000 block, wherever, I know we had some discrepancies a few different times on it, and I just think, let's just make sure that everybody's right. Joe shop and hop to the car wash. What currently exists probably, I think we fixed that, Show down at the other end of town, I think there might be some stuff off down towards Sibley's, Get my house right, Lonnie.
Michael, I think Madison produced a map or showed me a map that yours was corrected. That's the only discrepancy that I
house?
know of.
well, the one I was thinking of is Brian Sipes, when you had the meeting, the stakeholders meetings. And he said that house that he had, which the one was Carl Kruger designed. He stated that on the maps, it still showed it as open space. In that meeting we had.
I'll be happy to check, but
Why
I
don't we
think
just all
that's
look at
correct.
the maps next time?
So my suggestion on this would be like maybe a little letter, dear Minturn resident. We're redoing chapter 16 because they made it, not even know we're doing that. We'd love your input on how you like the area to live in. Here's some questions. And here's some areas, if you could just answer a few of these for us, make it real Minturn.
Yeah.
Real simple, but tell them why you're doing it too, because tell them we're going to be changing some things in the code and it may affect you. And this is why we'd like to do it. Where this just says, which of the following applies to you? I mean, I don't see any letterheading going with it anywhere. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, so the first page of that Minturn Forward survey, that's the information that would be presented, which says exactly what you just said.
I think Michael wants big bold letters on the top that say up zone ? Down zone ? And then your questions and see if that gets more response.
We're down, Lonnie.
Michael.
It's just strike that from the record.
Fire. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry to do this to you tonight, because I know that,
We're all tired.
well, no, it's not that we're all tired. I mean, we could have possibly weeded this out a little bit last time, but we didn't. And this way, we're getting there. But yeah, I don't think you're gonna get a response. You know, we sent out a market survey. The market survey got 12 responses. And people were, you know, I had a sign on in my store that people could, you know, it was a, what do you call it, QR code or something. And people were approached in the market, whatever, 12 responses. What, you're gonna have one this way, one that way. It really doesn't do any good unless you really figure out a way on how to get to them. And in the past, we have had meetings in this hall. And I don't know.
No, I would say the same thing. I mean, I did the Holy Cross Energy like
Yes.
QR code. And they did, I had QR everything going to the Forest Service, and this was like deal 48. And I put out 200 pamphlets.
You know, the way to do it here in this town is to be a real
25% is pretty
warm
good.
and cozy and talk to your neighbors.
I talked to a lot of people then.
Well, you could have 100 people reply if you keep, that might not even live in it.
So we do though, thank you all for going through this process. It's a really important process. Your code currently is in a very, very bad place. Tonight, you all approved a home that requires that you physically elevate the snow to get it to its snow storage location. Imagine that. You have to physically elevate the snow in Carl's house to get it to where it's going to be stored. That got approved tonight.
But we can put that in front of us, Michelle.
Exactly. It's in your code. So we thank you for going through this process so that that doesn't have to keep coming before you, because that's in your code right now. It doesn't say your snow storage has to be functional. There's no photo showing that it has to be functional. It just says it has to have that many square feet. And he had that many square feet. So you all did what you had to do, and our staff did what they had to do, because that was the code.
Yep.
And I mean, and I didn't say word, that's the code. And that's sprinkled throughout chapter 16, is this is what we are stuck with right now. And I hate using such negative terms, but I mean, we are stuck with it. I mean, imagine the people that live in that home cannot hire a plow remover to come and plow their snow away.
Yep, they can plow it right out into our street.
They're gonna.
Yeah.
Physically cannot hire a plow truck to come and plow. It has to physically get elevated 8-10 feet, depending on how high the snow piles get, in order to get it to be piled up to where it goes. Like.
Well, he was right, because he said, if you said it was 20, it had to be 20% of your parking lot space,
It's.
then it has to
the
be
code is
in your parking lot.
terrible shape. We need to go through this process. It is. We thank you for doing it. It's not fun. We thank you. We need it done. Scott's been tasked with this for years. We put Scott on hold. We said, get through the community plan first. That took a long time to get through the community plan. We got through it. Now we're here. And we do have to get through a very intensive public process. Because when this Minturn Forward gets to council, council's all going to say, what did you do with the public process? How did you reach out to all of them? How did you get their input? Because planning commission's purpose is to vision the built environment 30, 40, 50 years from now. Not just what does Michael's house look like today? What's it zoned today? And what's it going to be up zoned tomorrow? Down zoned tomorrow. God, Michael, say it one more time. See what happens. See what happens.
That's my answer.
See what happens. But we thank you all for doing it. So we know that, you know, the surveys take time. You know, the open houses take time. And it's, I live it, you guys, I live it. So I know. But we thank you all for doing it, because at the end of the day, when it gets to council and we all can give them the list ad nauseum. We did these surveys, we did these reviews of the surveys before they even went out. We had it on these websites, we had it on these e-blasts, we had it on these newsletters, in these lobbies, and all of these other things. This is our outreach that we did. So people had the chance to come in and give their input. And if there were only 12 responses because people chose not to do it, that's on them. But we tried. So I just want to thank you all. I see the frustration in everybody. It's palpable. I see it. And I just want to thank you all, because we're going to get through it. We're going to live through it. some of us might kill Michael before we get to the end. And that's okay. But we just want to thank you all.
Change too.
Thank you all, because it's a really important process, and our code needs to get to a better place for Minturn. So thank you very much.
Well, I've been saying it since how long? Since I've been on here.
Right.
Because I've seen it. I can't say I saw it back in Battle Mountain days, but I've seen it since then.
But the fact that we now physically have to lift snow and elevate it to get to where it's going to be stored is,
I know, snoring, yeah.
Michelle, my lawn is flat. I still have to snow blow over the fence.
perfect example.
It's an
Hi,
issue.
Michelle.
So thank you all.
So I'm sorry that I got to that, but I felt it was needed to be said, because when I read this, I've been on here 18 years. I know what this is saying to me, but I know some of my neighbors who wouldn't. And just because they wouldn't want to go, well, what do they want to know from me? They simply need to know what they love about where they live. What they don't want changed necessarily, if we can do that somehow nicely in a question without saying it exactly that way. You know, and have them really understand that this is going to affect the building code and it could change their neighborhood. In simple language. And hopefully that will work better. And as I said, at council the other night regarding water, I'm happy to put posters up in my store, put flyers out on the table, knock on my neighbors' doors, take them a letter and ask them to fill it out if they have any questions. I know you don't have the ability to do that, but this town functions that way. It really does. I put a book in my front door at the store that said, tell us what you love about Minturn. I got 3 books full. Just by people standing there and writing it in real quick. So anything that I can do,
I respect and understand your point, for sure. I understand it for sure. Yeah. I guess when Eagle Street people to come, just tell us when. You know.
give it up,
We're
give it up. We're not talking about.
No, I didn't mean it that way. Maybe it came out the wrong way, okay? If we're changing Eagle Street.
Michael, you represent the entire community. You represent more than Eagle Street.
I understand, I represent, and if we're changing Main Street, I represent them. And the upzoning people, we represent them. Everybody has a point. Absolutely. You know.
Hey, Michael, March 14th, that's the open house for the Eagle Street area.
Just them? Oh, is it just them?
No, it'll be Pine, Boulder. What else do we have? Eagle. Areas D, E, F, and G, I think is the way we laid it out.
Frankly,
The F and Gs?
Yeah,
I suggest that as many of us try to get to each open house as possible. And I think Scott, those aren't recorded at all, are they?
no, I was not planning on recording those. I don't know how we would. They're open houses.
Well,
There are
a
gonna
man
be
asked a question.
there'll be multiple stations set up around the hearing room with maps. I think, you know, part of one of the things I think we should be showing is the existing zoning map for those areas. Maybe even a list of existing permitted uses. So start as we're getting people's input on, you know, what makes their neighborhood unique, or what characteristics do they like? What do you like? What do you don't like? Start educating them on what do they have right now for a bundle of rights, existing permitted uses, what's their zoning, what are their current setbacks and things. So we start making them think about, okay, there might be changes coming their way, there might not, right? But using those open spaces not only to inform people on the fact that we're doing this and that there's a survey available, but also what do they have right now for zoning and setbacks and things like that.
Scott, is it too much? Is it too much to ask to list the use by rights for each zone and then have like another station even that is possibly what proposed uses for those zones that are sort of possibly going to be on the table, maybe, and or possible uses that may be taken off the table. And I'm not using any other words other than those words
And I
that some
appreciate
other
that,
people
Jeff.
might use on this board.
I don't think we're there yet, and I would hate to put out anything that's speculative in nature about things that might get added or things that might get taken away.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I think we've all been around the block enough to know that there are some things that have been maybe discussed between even you and the consultants that we've had, and just if there's a, rather than like blindside someone in a zone later, when the next open house comes up to actually talk about what we're proposing, if it's something that is worth listening to now, I'm just saying, like, I'm just putting it out there, like, is it worth, we don't want to start a fire over something that we don't need to start a fire over, but
I guess that would be my concern, Jeff, because, if I think back to the work that we did on the use table, there was just a few uses maybe that we were thinking of, eliminating from that use table. And as we revisit the work that we did, we might look at it through a different lens, and say, oh, well, we totally forgot this use, or now with the community plan recommending certain things, we need to add uses or take some away. That's why I've been a little hesitant, not a little, I've been a lot hesitant to bring that work back until we're ready to really talk about it and dive into the table of uses again, different zone districts and stuff like that. I just didn't want to confuse us or get thrown backwards, so to speak. That work might stand the test of time, and we might not tweak that much, and we might just use it, because we went so far as to create an entirely new table of uses. It would be awesome if we could just dust that off and say, you know what, this hits most of the marks. But we haven't had those conversations yet. So
no, but I guess to your point, like, if we're gonna dust it off and put it out there, like, would we, when we do, there's gonna need to be a transparent process with that as well, right? With the public to make sure that it holds water.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I hate to say this, and I'm not sure where we're going, but it is 10:10, and I believe at 10 o'clock, we have to decide if we're going to continue this or go home.
I like to just, yes, what Jeff just said, Scott, the stuff that's gone through. I don't, I'm not even quite sure. I'm not even quite sure where we're at this point. I don't know where we're at, so I guess if we're still taking input, trying to sort it out. No problem. No problem.
What else do we have tonight?
That's
it.
Let's go.
That's it.
if there's anybody here who has anything to say about something else. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
So therefore,
I make a motion to adjourn tonight's planning and.
Second.
I
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
Thanks, you
Thank
guys.
you, guys.
I hope you feel better.
Bye, Sage.
Bye, guys. Have a great night.
Bye.
Too.
Sage,
Thank you for the candy.
you're welcome.